Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku was Japan's first Quirkless Pro Hero Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 from WhatIf. So let's start the video. RD POV. The cool air that was flowing throughout the day was moving around Izuku as a nice breeze as he sat in the park with other children around his age. Izuku had quite a few friends, but the issue was that he noticed something was off recently with all of them after he had turned 4 years old. Now turning 4 years old doesn't seem like a big issue or an issue at all, which might make you start wondering why this was an issue for his friends that he had, but we all know the reason in reality. It's because the world is not fair, as men are not born equal in this world, for there are those born with various powers called quirks, while there are also those that are not born with the so-called quirks. Izuku was the last person in his entire class that hadn't awakened his quirk like everyone else had, which has raised concerns in both him and his mother. As such, Izuku Midoriya had decided to take her son Izuku to visit a quirk specialist to see if they could find out why Izuku's quirk had not come in yet, since everyone in his class had theirs already while he didn't. Izuku was honestly thinking that he was just going to be a late bloomer, since it has been heard that quirks could come in typically from 3 to 5, with typical lateness of being at 6 or 7. 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 Midoriya had recently left to go to America for business due to his workplace sending him away, which has made things harder for the family, but 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 did earn enough that she didn't need to work, which she was thankful for since it allowed her to raise Izuku. However, she really wishes he was here for these types of moments, as Izuku pulled up to the hospital where the quirk specialist worked at. Izuku was in the back playing with his All Might action figure that he had gotten recently. Izuku smiled as she looked at her son. She moved to where Izuku was sitting in the car and lifted him out of the car seat. Izuku did as he was told, and Izuku took his hand as they walked into the hospital for the appointment with the quirk doctor. Soon they sat down as they waited for the doctor to call them in to start doing the medical exams. Time went by, and after about an hour of doing medical tests, a nurse approached them as she asked them to follow her to a room where the doctor was waiting at. When they arrived at the room, they found a different man than the doctor that had conducted the tests on her son. Izuku asked, and the newer doctor explained that Dr. 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗧 had to go for a medical emergency in another part of the hospital. As such, I am here to deliver the results, since it can be any doctor or even a nurse to read the information off to you, since it's a bit straightforward in case of your son. As I say that, ma'am, I am sorry to say that your son will not be receiving a quirk. As you can see on this x-ray of his foot, he had the double toe joint, which is only found in quirkless people nowadays. In addition to this, we found no active quirk factor in his blood work that we had done, which only confirms that he is indeed quirkless, said the doctor. Izuku froze as he looked at the doctor and uttered a question. The question he asked was if he could become a hero still, and the doctor sighed as he looked sadly at the kid before him, which was Izuku. The doctor took a second before he spoke, but it wasn't anything good. No, I am so sorry, kid, but there has never been a Quirkless Pro Hero here in Japan, said the doctor, and Izuku at that point dropped the All Might action figure on the floor that he was holding tightly onto. Izuku used her quirk to pull it off the ground, and the doctor spoke about how he should have gotten a quirk, but he just didn't. Overall, 20% of the world population is quirkless. It's rarer in the younger generations, but it still happens. Do you have any other questions? The doctor asked, and Izuku shook her head. There was nothing else she could ask of the man, as the result was final. What could she do to change the result that was a cold, hard truth? That is right. Nothing. After composing herself, she thanked him for his time as she took Izuku, who had grown silent, to the car and started the drive home. Izuku was worried but thought that he was just in a minor shock right now due to hearing the news he was given by the doctor. She was honestly right, as he finally processed his thoughts later that night when he turned around from his computer and looked at his mother as he asked the question. Mom? Can I be a hero too? He asked in a shaky voice as he let some tears go down his face. Izuku gripped her hands together as she moved to him and only hugged her son as she apologized to him. However, Izuku knew that isn't what he needed to hear that night, but it was the only thing that Izuku Midoriya could give him. However, Izuku knew that isn't what he needed to hear that night, but it was the only thing that Izuku Midoriya could give him. as she had no other clue on what to say to her boy that had his dreams shattered at the young age of 4. She could only apologize and keep apologizing to him over and over again as she hugged him. Izuku went to sleep that night with tears going down his face, and Inko called her husband to inform him of the test results. 𝗧𝗵𝗃 expressed his regrets that their son was quirkless in the world since it was so quirked-based, but there was nothing he could do about it. He apologized to her and told her that he had to get ready for work since it was early in the day in America compared to nighttime in Japan. The phone call came to an end without fanfare, and that was how Izuku Midoriya life started to turn sour for him, as the news of him being quirkless quickly spread across his school and the locals where they lived, since the teachers told the students and the students told their families. It was a vicious cycle that had started for the Midoriya family because the world was not fair. Izuku knew why all of his friends, or rather former friends, had distanced themselves in recent times. He knew now that being quirkless was more or less a death sentence, even though his mind couldn't fully comprehend it due to how young he was, but he knew he was being treated differently by everyone else, from his peers to the staff at school, since the appointment at the doctor's office. A child is very perceptive in the treatment that they receive when they compare it to another child's care. He could feel the stares of disgust and pity that other adults sent towards him and his mother, but as a 4-year-old, he could do nothing about it but keep silent and go with it. Years had passed since that day in the doctor's office, and the discrimination had only increased from the looks he received from the other adults, as Izuku suffered at the hands of his peers who would laugh and pick on him for holding on to his dreams of wanting to be a pro hero even though he was quirkless. Izuku would also be neglected by the caretakers at his schools who were meant to help and protect the children, but for him, they turned a blind eye as they wrote it off as children being children when they knew that it was bullshit. They would always say that the children just got a bit too rough and waved it off when Izuku knew he wasn't dumb as others would call him, even though he was quirkless. Being quirkless didn't mean he was an idiot or mentally challenged. No, instead, for Izuku, he took it as a challenge and a way to pass the time, as he would only increase his intelligence since he spent no time with other children unless they were bullying him. Outside of all of this, he did spend time with his aunt's child who had turned 5 recently while Izuku was 8 years old now. This child was named Bakugo Katsuki. Katsuki was gifted in the quirk department as he had a quirk called explosions. Now, the Bakugos weren't really related to the Midoriyas, but they were close family friends, and his aunt would always watch after Izuku if his mother had to work and couldn't care for Izuku, since 𝗧𝗵𝗃 had started to decrease the amount of money he was sending home over the years. Izuku in all honesty believed it was due to the fact that he was quirkless, but had no way to confirm due to his father never contacting him. Izuku also knew that his mother didn't want to talk about it, which Izuku accepted and left alone, even though he wanted the real truth. Izuku though would admit that he doesn't even remember his father's voice or really what he looked like, since there weren't any pictures of him in the home. Inko always told Izuku that 𝗧𝗵𝗃 was camera shy and there were only a few photos she had, but those got lost over the years or damaged too much, which meant she had no more photos since Izuku's father had gone to America, so she couldn't take any more. Now, outside of the father issue and discrimination that Izuku received, Izuku also started to put more time into his quirk analysis for the future because he refused to not have any skills to help him in life. He called these his hero notebooks for the future, or hero analysis for the future, as he would analyze how pro heroes were fighting villains in the streets when he was going back and forth from school. Izuku also spent time chasing down fights if they were near him, but he was always smart and stayed behind the police lines though. Izuku didn't want to worry his mother even more, so he made sure to keep his distance. Even though Izuku was getting much better at his analysis, the notebooks only fueled more discrimination by his peers, as the other children would have more stuff to laugh at him for, as they would always ridicule his books as trash and creepy. However, these notebooks would later prove so much use, but it wasn't directly time for that topic yet, as Izuku hadn't experienced the results on why his skills that he had developed since the age of 4 had become so important for his life. No, it would be a year later, when Izuku had recently turned 9 years old, that he would start to learn how valuable his hero books were. The 9-year-old Izuku had been traveling home later in the afternoon one day, since he had forgotten what time it was outside, which caused it to start to darken out, which meant he had to quickly get home. He pulled his phone out and remembered his mother wouldn't be home for another hour or so since she had worked a late shift at the hospital since she had become a nurse since Izuku knew the money from Hisashi became almost non-existent. That is right, it's Hisashi instead of father or dad because Izuku doesn't see the man as a father in his life as the man had made it clear via his actions that he didn't want Izuku so Izuku didn't want him either. Now back to Izuku who was running home when he heard a sound in the alleyway which caused him to stop and look down the alley. Izuku saw a man in black clothing wielding a scarf as he fought what appeared to be a villain. Izuku was confused about who this person was and thought it was a vigilante most likely, but that was until he heard the criminal utters the person's name or an alias. "What are you doing in these parts, Eraserhead?" the criminal asked, and the man with the scarf now known as Eraserhead smirked a bit as his eyes glowed and hair floated. "What happened to my quirk?" the criminal said, and Eraserhead spoke up and said he erased it. This caught Izuku's attention as another man ran into the alleyway and charged at Eraserhead. Eraserhead quickly switched to the new man as he activated his quirk, but Izuku noticed it didn't affect the new man but heard a statement from Eraserhead. "Damn it. A mutation quirk," Eraserhead said, and at that moment Izuku knew that this hero's or vigilante's quirk didn't work on mutations, which meant that Eraserhead had to fight without his quirk aka Quirkless, which caught Izuku's attention. Izuku wouldn't admit it, but all of the bullying and statements from others had an effect on him, but what this hero or vigilante was doing had caught his attention. Izuku watched as Eraserhead quickly defeated the new criminal and made quick work of the other one as well as he erased the quirk again. Izuku decided it was time for him to leave as he didn't want to get caught up in the mess. As such, he ran away without creating really any noise, which Eraserhead didn't notice due to the sounds the criminals were making. Izuku arrived back at his home and was in luck as his mother was not off work yet, which meant he wasn't going to be found out on how late he was outside since the sun was completely gone already for about 40 minutes now as night had set in. After getting his things off, Izuku wrote any information he learned off of the hero or vigilante called Eraserhead before he started searching the alias up online on some hero forums and other sites. Izuku learned after quite a bit of digging onto some more hidden forums that Eraserhead was not a vigilante but an underground hero. This new information would in turn set Izuku off on a new path as he learned more about the underground hero world and how it differed from the limelight heroes. That night, Izuku lost his dream of being a hero like All Might who saved everyone in the daylight with a smile, and instead he grew a new dream of being an underground hero like his new idol Eraserhead, who quirk didn't work on mutations, which meant he fought Quirkless. Even with his quirk, he still had to fight Quirkless against the others but could only bring the fight to a somewhat level playing field, which Izuku knew he could do with support gear as well. This was the origin of Izuku Midoriya and how his life took a sad twist but yet had an entire twist to a new path that he didn't know existed. Quirkless he may be, but without hope and ability to do stuff, he was not, as Izuku Midoriya vowed that being declared quirkless was the last major setback he was going to allow happen so easily in his life as he set off on his path of being Japan's first quirkless underground pro hero who could break things down in his mind as he had crafted his mind to amazing heights. It had been a while since he witnessed the fight that the underground pro hero Eraserhead had in that alleyway that late afternoon, and Izuku had started to make changes to his life as best as a 9-year-old could. Izuku knew his mother wasn't really the best at being supportive of his dreams to become a hero, but he knew she would at least support him in getting physically fit and staying healthy if he worded his requests to her correctly. As such, he had asked her if he could join a dojo that teaches self-defense and other things so he could be physically active and learn things while doing it. Inko though was honestly hesitant since she in all honesty knew that Izuku was doing this since he wanted to be a pro hero, but she ended up agreeing in the end after some pushing from her son who didn't let up easily on requesting to do it. She also had no way to outright reject his request as he was framing it in a way of learning self-defense skills while being healthy, which would be wrong of her to say anything against such a request for Izuku's own safety since it did mean he could better protect himself if he ever got attacked. It took some time, but Izuku had found a dojo that would likely meet his needs overall since he had to do a bit of research through all of the different possible options. The dojo that he had found was a more old-style dojo that didn't really have any people it was teaching currently due to how it compared to other dojos near it. There was also the fact that it was operated by an older man, which made some people think against joining the dojo since they didn't think a single old man could be effective in teaching. Even Izuku was a bit hesitant, but he also knew a lot more of the other dojos would likely discriminate against him due to being quirkless. As such, he decided to check the dojo out with the older man who would be more direct in the training and likely not discriminate since quirkless people were more common in the past, which older people would be used to and less judgmental of Izuku's lack of a quirk. However, as Izuku dug more into the dojo, it wasn't the fact that the man was really old that surprised Izuku. No. It was the fact that Izuku recognized this man from somewhere and he was trying to figure it out but couldn't, which bugged Izuku, which meant he wanted to at least meet the older man to see if he could figure it out. The man looked very old and all of his hair and beard was white now, but yet he carried an aura of imposing dominance that suggested you would lose and die if you opposed him. This man looked like a trained warrior with decades of experience from the image on the dojo's website. This man looked like a trained warrior with decades of experience from the image on the dojo's website 38. Inko and Izuku greeted the man as they entered the old dojo. The man introduced himself as Rolling, Seth. Seth Rolling. That feels familiar. Izuku thought as he knew he have read something about this man outside of the dojo's information. The man had asked why they were at the dojo, and before Inko spoke up, Izuku decided to voice his desires by himself without his mother wording it in a kind manner due to him being quirkless. Izuku wasn't going to sugarcoat anything about his situation even if his mother wanted to be careful with him being quirkless. Mister, I am quirkless and am looking for a dojo that will train me. I am in all honesty wanting to become an underground pro hero, so I need somewhere that will teach me how to fight and defend myself against others as well as physical conditioning. I know the more popular dojos run a risk of discriminating against me and incorrectly teaching me as well due to me being quirkless, said the 9-year-old Izuku Midoriya, who had shocked both his mother and the owner of the dojo. Inko then apologized to the man for her son's outburst, but Izuku stared at the man who was staring at Izuku with a fierce glare which concerned Inko but didn't faze Izuku as he didn't feel an overwhelming pressure that Izuku thought the man could carry. I've received enough glares from my bullies and teachers, and this doesn't seem as strong as the man could put off. Izuku thought as he felt no ill intentions in the man's eyes since Izuku was good at reading people due to his life experiences so far and analysis of people. They kept staring at each other until the man released an overwhelming aura that made Inko drop to the floor to a kneel as she felt overwhelming fear. Izuku gritted his teeth and struggled to stay up but soon fell to his knees as it felt hard to breathe. Oh, you were able to last so long for a child. Interesting. Tell me, boy, why do you want to be a hero? Seth Rolling asked. Inko had stood up at this point and Izuku wobbled as he stood and looked at the man as he spoke. I've always wanted to be a hero. At first, I wanted to be like All Might and reassure people with a smile as I saved them, but once I was declared quirkless, that dreamed died as I knew I couldn't do that anymore. Instead, I want to become an underground pro hero since I could still save people but also have more of an advantage since underground heroes rely more on ambushing and the cover of night to accomplish their goals. Both sides of heroism save people, so it doesn't matter that I can no longer go limelight like I used to plan for. I can still inspire others as a quirkless hero even if my face isn't known to others. The mere fact a quirkless person accomplished becoming a hero is proof enough for others to aim for it. Izuku said as he took a breath since he had said a lot without stopping. Inko was in shock at what she heard her son say. She always knew that he never gave up on his dreams to become a hero and this confirmed it, but she wondered what the underground hero was since she's never heard of that term before until her son had said it. Though her thoughts were broken when the man started to laugh, which made Inko and Izuku think that the man was going to reject Izuku due to his dreams and being quirkless, but it turns out they were way off. Could I like your spirit, your will, and your determination. I will accept you into the Vagabond Dojo, said Seth Rolling, and at that statement, Izuku's eyes widened but not for the reason of being accepted. Yes, Izuku was thrilled to be accepted, but it wasn't the reason his eyes were so wide since he now knew where he recognized the man from. It was from old news articles on heroes from before even All Might was a pro hero. The man in front of Izuku was a former hero that had long retired. I recognize you. Izuku said, which shocked Inko, and the man's smile widened as he asked Izuku what he knew of him, since the man was honestly surprised someone as young as Izuku would know anything of him. As such, he wanted to see how much Izuku Midoriya knew. You are 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃, the former #1 hero that was around years before All Might came around. You retired about 5 years before All Might started to make a name for himself, and then years later, he came back to Japan, but you held the #1 position for so long even though you retired years before you really needed to, according to theories. Most people didn't know your name as you only went by your hero name 𝗣𝗲𝗵, and there was only one time that a name was associated with you which had been hidden greatly online, but there are still a few places to find it. Izuku said, and the man asked how he found this information out, and Izuku explained that he found old articles since he wanted to see the type of heroes before All Might came around, which made the man smile as he confirmed that Izuku was indeed correct. Inko was shocked at her son's wealth of knowledge on such old heroes because even she remembers the pro hero 𝗣𝗲𝗵 but had no idea this man was him since his face was hidden nearly all of the time back then. There was only a rare photo or two, but they would normally get removed quickly. Inko also wasn't huge into heroes as she had other things to focus on in her life before Izuku was born. Good job on discovering so much information about me. The thing I want to know is if you know what my quirk is. 𝗧 asked Izuku as he had a smile on his face. Izuku went into his memories and thought about it before speaking since there was no real answer online that directly said what it was. No, there was no information on what your quirk was. I doubt you are quirkless since it would have been a large amount of news if you were ever that. Even though being quirkless was rare, it was still more common the further you go back. There were also times you did say you had a quirk but wanted to keep it quiet to avoid villains trying to counter it. Izuku said before he started to think again on everything he had in his memory before he provided a theory on what the quirk was. After a few more minutes of silence and 𝗣𝗲𝗵 watching Izuku think, Izuku had a theory. However, you use weapons. Swords, knives, throwing tools, axes, and any other types of handheld weapons, but never guns or any of those types of weapons. I believe you have a quirk that is likely relating to mastery of single-handed weapons since that is what you always used. You never used a double-handed weapon, or at least it wasn't reported. I don't consider using both hands on a sword as a double-handed weapon since none of the swords that you had used would historically be labeled as such. No, you did it to apply more force. Izuku said as he muttered it out of his mind, and 𝗧 just smirked but said he was wrong but close, which made Izuku smile a bit that he was indeed close. My quirk was called weapon knowledge. It provided me the ability to learn how to wield a weapon of my choice at a faster rate, which I was in luck with that quirk since my family owned a dojo that trained in weapons. As such, I mastered almost all the weapons I could when I was young, though I never learned guns since I didn't like them for personal preference, said the retired #1 pro hero, which shocked Izuku. The reason it shocked Izuku was due to the implications of what 𝗣𝗲𝗵 had just said. The reason there were shocking implications of what was 𝗧's quirk was that everything he did could be recreated by a quirkless person with a sheer amount of training, and 𝗧 nodded his head as Izuku had muttered all of that out loud, which he blushed at due to being shy. I admit, you will face discrimination without a doubt, but what I did can be accomplished by you as my quirk provided me only knowledge at a faster rate. You can't learn all the weapons I use since there are so many and you only have so many years, so you will need to focus on certain things, and we also need to do physical condition as well. However, it is possible to become a quirkless hero if you have the willpower to survive the training. So, Izuku Midoriya, do you have what it takes, or will you surrender in defeat? 𝗧 rolling. The retired hero known as 𝗣𝗲𝗵 asked Izuku with fierce eyes, which Izuku only met with eyes filled with pure determination as he knew he had found the path to help make his dreams a reality. Inko though coughed and they both realized she was still there, which they apologized for forgetting about her. Sorry mom. Forgot you were here. Izuku said with she rolled her eyes at as she said she noticed that, which Izuku rubbed his head when she said that. She then looked at the retired pro hero and asked her what underground heroics was, as they had talked about it, but she never heard of anything called underground heroics before. 𝗧 nodded his head a bit before speaking. Heroics have two sides, the daylight like All Might, Endeavor, and all of the other heroes you see on TV. These type of heroes you tend to think about when you think about being a pro hero, but there is so much more than just that. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said as he explained to Izuku Midoriya what the normal concept of heroics was when people thought about it. Izuku nodded her head as that was indeed what she thought about in her mind when she heard or talked about heroes. Then there are the unseen heroes called underground heroes who tend to never go on TV. They patrol at night since crime never stops. I am not surprised your son found about them since it's clear he has done his research into the field of heroics quite a bit since he knew about me. 𝗧 said as he explained the main differences between the two sides, which included many things. One is that they tend to have quirks that are less flashy and have ways to get around them which needs to be kept hidden. They tend to use the cover of night to attack criminals and villains that are causing problems. They go after drug rings, sex trafficking rings, and other types of things that most daylight heroes ignore since you don't find those things out on the public street where limelight heroes are really only at. The underground heroes tend to focus on organized crime and information gathering via stealth operations. 𝗧 said, which shocked Izuku about an entire side of heroics she didn't know about. Soon the conversation shifted into if 𝗧 was going to take Izuku, on which he clearly said he was, which then turned the conversation into the topic of money because they didn't know how much 𝗧 would charge. 𝗧 thought it over and shrugged. I don't need money. The only thing I would ask is that you take care of his food needs, since they will rise due to how much he will work out. Before you say anything else, please remember I was the #1 pro hero for years. I am well off in regards to money, and I decline all of the people that try to join this dojo since I was looking for a student to teach personally that I believed had values similar to mine. I didn't go into the field for money or fame but got it anyway. I also wanted to teach the mastery of weapon arts and my fighting style, which wouldn't go well with other people who had all those flashy quirks. I wanted to save people just like your son, as such I won't charge for the lessons. 𝗧 said as he refused her attempts to pay for the lessons, and Izuku smiled greatly at the reasons why 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 had gone into the hero field, as they were indeed similar to why Izuku wants to be a pro hero. The Midoriyas soon left the dojo with a promise from Izuku to start showing up at the dojo every afternoon after school, as they would soon figure out a correct schedule for his training. But first 𝗧 needed to know where Izuku was at overall in skills and knowledge of things before he could plan things out. They had roughly over 5 years before Izuku would be attempting for the UA entrance exams, and 𝗧 had warned Izuku of how biased the exams are against non-physical quirks since the exam was filled with robots. 𝗧 knew he shouldn't tell the boy since the school tried to keep the exam overall a secret, but 𝗧 really didn't care since they were going to be fighting an uphill battle already. Also, he had some other reasons, like heroes are meant to correct unfairness and injustice in the world, which was just one way of doing it for his new personal student. Also, the information could be found if you dug deep enough on the web since the internet is forever. As such, if he just hinted on what to do to Izuku, he was sure the boy could find all of the information out, so why bother wasting time that could be used on other things? Izuku and Izuku arrived back at the home and started to relax. Izuku looked at Izuku and spoke up. Sweetie, I am sorry for not being more supportive of your dreams, but I will try to be better about it. I hope Mr. Rowling will be able to help you accomplish your dreams via his training. Izuku said as she hugged Izuku, who had broken into tears at hearing his mother's words. It was an admission he never thought he would receive from his mother, and it helped his overall mental state so much since he believed she would never support him in chasing his dreams. This was the start of Izuku grabbing the future and creating his path to be Japan's first quirkless hero. RDPOV. Izuku soon appeared at the dojo after classes. Even though he went through a day filled with endless discrimination, he was still in high moods that even they couldn't crush due to how much he was looking forward to getting to work at the dojo. Izuku entered the dojo, and within moments he found himself thrown across the room to his surprise as he landed on the floor in pain. Izuku groaned as he got up and looked around as his eyes landed on his new teacher 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃, who was standing at the door. Always be looking out and keeping your awareness up for a potential attack. Always be looking out and keeping your awareness up for a potential attack. One screw up and you die in the field of heroics. Even when you off the clock, you could still be killed if a villain ever found out where you lived, which has happened before for past heroes. As such, that is your first lesson. Never let your guard down because you don't have a quirk to fall back onto like others do. You only have your body as your weapon and any tools you can get by extension of your body. Seth said as he told Izuku to sit near the middle of the fighting area as he moved over to it as well. Izuku nodded his head at the words that his new master was imparting to him and would take it to heart because he was right. If Izuku allowed his body to be heavily damaged, then he was dead or would be removed from the field. They both sat down in the center of the sparring area as Izuku looked at his new master and waited for him to speak. First, I want to know what training you have done right now overall that could help you in your hero career. This can include mental training, physical training, or anything else that can give you an advantage. Seth said, and Izuku admitted that overall he had no physical training done, but he did believe he had some mental training done that he would like to show him. Seth Rolling nodded his head and told Izuku to get whatever he needed if it was close by. Izuku grabbed his school bag and pulled out his hero analysis for the future notebook and showed the contents to his master. At first, Seth thought it would be lacking in details for a child of Izuku's age, but he was quite surprised at what he found inside the notebook. Overall, it contained a scary degree of information from weaknesses, strengths, theories, and many other things on heroes that Izuku has come across or researched into. Seth then looked at the title again and saw it was only the 8th notebook, which meant there were 7 more before the one in his hand. These are good. They are not at the level of a seasoned professional in clarity, but if you looked past that, then the analysis is a lethal tool. Maybe another year or more and he would match paid professionals that stand at the top of the field. Even now the level of details is far better than most low-level professionals, but again it lacks clarity, which means most would ignore his work if they didn't know what they were looking at. Seth thought as he read the book. He then set it down and looked at Izuku for a few minutes. I will be honest. This notebook is dangerous to have out like this. You need to learn how to encode your books since the information here could have many heroes dead. Do you understand? Seth asked, and Izuku was shocked as he told Seth that it was just a hobby he started when he was 4 and got declared quirkless. That surprised Seth that Izuku was completely self-taught, but it only made it even more impressive that Izuku didn't learn how to do it from anyone else. Well, I can tell you that everyone that told you it was trash or worthless was dead wrong. It's nearly the level of paid professionals. Seth said, and Izuku's eyes widened as he was told how good it was. Seth also went in on how Izuku should keep practicing it with the aim of making his notes more clear and organized to be on a more professional level. The reason for that is due to the fact that you could do what you did on heroes on villains as well from seeing them or video clip for investigations or out on the field. Overall, it's an amazing skill you have, and if you can incorporate it into the real-time analysis of people you are fighting, it could prove lethal for your opponents as you could take them down with minimum effort, unlike other heroes who would need to force their way through things. This will be one of the things we will train you in over the years, which will take a large amount of time, but we got enough years for you to do it. Seth said, and Izuku nodded his head in understanding as he was so happy to learn that his notes were so good and could truly help him in the hero field as he had hoped. Seems my notes were truly worth the effort. Izuku thought as he was so happy to find out how his hard work in gaining that skill was going to pay off for him. They then moved on to some other ideas that Seth wanted Izuku to do, which again, he suggested that Izuku start writing notebooks on villains, which he could call the notes villain analysis for the future or something, but again they would need to be encoded, which Seth said he would teach him an old method that he used when he was still active in the field. However, that would be on another day. As such, until then Seth wanted Izuku to bring all of his notebooks with him and leave them in his care. You will need to destroy the old notebooks once you have transferred them into the new ones with a code, as they are far too dangerous to leave around, Seth explained, and Izuku agreed as Seth had laid out a logical reason and explanation on why they needed to be hidden in Seth's care until Izuku had them encoded. After that, they moved on to other things that Izuku believed he had already going for him, which Izuku didn't have anything else besides his natural intelligence, which was quite higher than others, but the teachers were sabotaging it. Seth Rolling was not pleased with how Izuku's teachers were handling his new protege. I need to look into those schools, but for now, that can wait. I need to get him into a schedule for his overall training. Seth thought as he looked Izuku over as he had Izuku remove his shirt so he could examine his current muscle state. Overall, Izuku was in a pathetic condition, which Seth commented on. So, how are you planning to be a hero? Even an underground one if you weren't training? Seth had asked Izuku, who pouted a bit. That is why I am here now for training. Before now I was still focused on wanting to be like All Might, which was stupid of me, and I got caught up in my mind of not having a quirk. In all honesty, I knew deep down I couldn't do it, but a new dream came to light when I saw Eraserhead fighting one night when I was on my way home. This sparked everything else that leads to this point. Izuku said truthfully, and 𝗧 nodded his head. 𝗧 was glad that Izuku stopped dreaming about being a hero like All Might because he had to admit it would never be possible. Izuku would never have that level of strength, so he needed to be realistic on what type of hero he could be and what limits he had, which they could expand with time. Though he first needed to get in the door of UA first, since they currently were the only school that was accepting of quirkless students, even though 𝗧 was sure none actually went to the school. After a bit more thinking, 𝗧 gave Izuku a general plan for his starting workout. It included a set routine of physical exercise from push-ups and planking that he was meant to do until they moved on more things. 𝗧 told Izuku that he would pull out the weight equipment from storage in the next week or so to set aside on the other side of the dojo for Izuku to use. Otherwise, Izuku was meant to start running each day and slowly increase his distance that he ran until he reached 2 miles of running. Once everything became easier for him to do, then they would start moving on to other training such as basics of weapons, but Izuku needed a base physical condition before he could really use the weapons efficiently. This was due to the weight of some weapons, and if Izuku couldn't have force behind his swings or blows, then there was no point in the weapons since they wouldn't be really effective, as people could easily dodge a slow swing or attack. A weapon is only as good as the core, and for you, your body is your main weapon, but right now your core would snap if pressure was applied to it, so we need to build it up before making the weapon itself, 𝗧 said as he used weapon making as a reference to why they would train physically first before ever touching swords or other tools, which Izuku said he understood. Soon Izuku could be found on the dojo floor as he was doing the set routine that 𝗧 had provided Izuku, which was difficult for Izuku since he had never truly done any physical workouts outside of the gym class at school. While Izuku was doing this, 𝗧 was starting to write out a more detailed plan and steps that they would be doing moving forward. These things included getting weights to put on Izuku that he would use throughout the day, which would help slowly increase his abilities. Another thing was to look into a way for Izuku to get more practical experience out of his notebooks, since 𝗧 believed that there were many good suggestions for heroes to take and use to improve themselves, but he needed to be careful to not allow ill-intended parties to find about Izuku since the information was dangerous. However, the time has flown by and it was now time for Izuku to leave the dojo as the first day of training had come to an end, as he needed to return home for the day since he still had homework to complete and dinner to eat. 𝗧 said goodbye to Izuku as the boy left, but then returned to his planning while Izuku decided to run home instead of walking for more physical exercise, as he knew his time was limited and counting down by day. By the time he got home, he was panting as he realized the distance between the two locations was fairly long, and due to him not doing much running, he was sore in his legs and was tired. Izuku entered his home and 𝗵𝗃 had asked him how his first day of training went. Izuku laid down on the couch and explained how it all went. Turns out those notebooks I am doing are really dangerous. He wants all of them in his custody until he teaches me how to encode them so people can't easily get the information. He said nearly all of the heroes in my books could end up dead with the information in them since they are nearly professional level but lacking clarity and structure of my notes, which I am lacking. Izuku said, and 𝗵𝗃 was stunned since she always thought it was just a fanboy hobby of her son's, but turns out it was a lethal hobby of her son instead. Well, that is good, you will learn that, she said, as she honestly didn't know what to say in regards to it all. What do you honestly say when you are the parent and your child just told you that he had a lethal skill and a large amount of information to kill people with the said skill, which you never realized how lethal it was to start off with? You don't really say anything and you just pretend everything is normal, which 𝗵𝗃 decided to do. Izuku then went on to explain how 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 was going to be teaching how to incorporate his analysis abilities into combat, since if Izuku could do that, then he could take down a lot of his opponents quickly without much fighting, which made 𝗵𝗃 happy as her son would be safer. I guess something really good came out of those notebooks, except the dangerous element that Mr. Rowling says they have. 𝗵𝗃 thought as she listened to her son keep talking about his day as she cooked. I won't be getting into weapons training or anything anytime soon, he told me. I need to get physical training in so I could have the power behind my attacks. Izuku said, and she nodded her head. Inko honestly didn't know how to feel about her son wielding weapons like a sword, but Mr. Rowling had taken her aside before they left on the first meeting and expressed why Izuku needed to learn them and use them. They would provide Izuku an advantage in the field, but they also wouldn't be his sole attack option or defense, since Izuku would be taught martial arts and to use other gear like sleeping darts or something else that they could figure out in the near future. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀 had told Inko that Izuku could and likely will kill one day when he became a hero, since the man himself had killed a handful over his career since the villains left no other choice compared to innocent lives. As such, having the knowledge of a deadly weapon would be extremely beneficial if it came down to it, but Izuku could also use them to not kill but injure as well. Soon the dinner was done and Izuku had just come back from the quick shower that he had taken. They both sat down and started to eat as they talked a bit more. Izuku was far happier on a visible scale, which in Inko's mind made everything worth it, since she knew her son was getting bullied at school from what she had seen, but she couldn't do anything about it since they never would do anything when she had tried in the past. As such, she would do her best at home and support her son from now on far more than she did in the past. Inko was happy she agreed to let him go to that dojo and was hoping his dreams would come true. Izuku was sitting stunned in the dojo after hearing what his master had just told him. Izuku looked at the man and asked him to repeat what he had just said, and the man only chuckled as he looked at Izuku, who had a dumbfounded expression on his face. I said that it has been half a year now of all of your physical training and other training that I've had you doing. I want to add another step to everything moving forward. I want you to start a side gig of being a hidden analysis that gives information to the police and heroes, said 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀 as he looked at Izuku with a smirk. Izuku rolled his eyes and asked why would he become an almost vigilante in a sense, as he would be tipping information off to heroes and police. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀 shook his head and made himself more clear. You are not going out and chasing crimes. No, you are going to provide your analysis of heroes and villains that you know of to the heroes. How you do this and go about it is completely up to you, but I want to make a bet out of this. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀 said as he looked at Izuku, who was now interested in what the bet was, since they have had bets before which tend to always turn out interesting. One bet, for example, in the past was if Izuku could do a certain amount of push-ups with an X amount of weight on his back. He won, which resulted in his master changing his hair color to pink for a few weeks, which Izuku thought the bet was worth it for the soreness he had later on. If Izuku had lost the bet, then his green hair would have been pink for a few weeks, but in the end, he won the bet. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀 smiled as he got Izuku's attention like normal with the bets and then told him what the bet was. The bet is how quickly you get found out and discovered. If you get found out before you enter UA Hero School, then you lose, which means that I will get to pick your hero name out when it comes time for it. If you win, then I will give you my blade 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝗃, which was specially made to be nearly indestructible. It's one of a kind blade made by a quirk user when I started my hero career. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗀 said, and Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief, since 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝗃 was really the only sword that his master ever used in his hero career when he didn't use any other weapon. From the information that Izuku knew from his research, the Japanese sword katana was created by a family of blacksmiths who lived on one of the smaller islands of Japan. They are still around, but getting a blade made by them is extremely hard since they only accept few requests from anyone, and the family tends to relocate every once in a while without telling people where they go. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗀 explained to Izuku that he had saved the young son of the main blacksmith back then when he was still a hero in training, and they offered him a sword since they saw him use one as part of his hero outfit. The sword he was using broke during combat, as such they wanted to gift him a sword that was nearly indestructible. It was said that the swords by them could withstand the attacks from 𝗲𝗏 himself, and it would take nearly the heat and force combined from a nuclear bomb to break it due to the special quirk that runs in that family that makes the swords. Nothing was completely indestructible, but so far nothing had been able to do it, and in 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗀's view not even 𝗲𝗏 with all of his power could break it or chip it, since he's put the blade through many hardships in his hero career which would match a punch from 𝗲𝗏 in some cases. Anyway, back to the main topic. Do you accept the bet and challenge? It's not like 𝗧𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗀 gets used by me anymore these days anyway. Even though I maintain an active license for emergencies that I find myself in, I never carry the blade with me out of these halls anymore and only wield small hidden blades since they get the job done in small encounters that I've had. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗀 said as he looked at the blade that was sitting on its stand in the dojo. Izuku took a second but nodded his head as he said he wanted to accept the bet, as having Izanagi as one of his main weapons would be a huge boost to his fighting capabilities. As such, Izuku headed home after the training and got to work on figuring a way out to create a side identity as a hidden analysis that would send information to heroes. The problem was getting heroes to trust the said information. That is when Izuku realized who the principal of UA was and decided to start there. The current principal of UA was known as Nizu, who was an animal with a quirk, but not just any quirk at all, but a very special one. This quirk was called High Spec and provided Nizu with higher intelligence than humans themselves, which did result in Nizu getting experimented on by humans if Izuku's research on the Pro Hero was accurate, though information limited and theories had to be made. Now you might wonder why the principal of UA was important for Izuku's side gig of doing analysis of heroes and villains? Well, Principal Nizu was respected in the hero field due to how well he did his jobs and work, so Izuku knew if he could get the man to trust his abilities on the work he did, then the principal would end up providing the individual heroes the work he had completed. There was also the fact that Nizu was more of a strategic planning type hero with a hand in the analysis field as well. However, this was a huge risk due to the fact that Principal Nizu was one of the best people at likely figuring Izuku's identity out, which means he could lose the bet before he ever arrived at UA. There were risks and there were rewards of using Nizu to get his goal accomplished. As such, as he's sitting there at his desk in his room, he finally came to a decision on how he was going to move forward. Izuku decided to make an alias that he would send information under since he couldn't get caught, and he would also send it out of a different location since he didn't know anything about hacking to keep his location hidden. However, Izuku knew the blind spots of his local library's security system, which meant he could send it from one of the computers that are located in the blind spots, as it wouldn't be unnormal for Izuku to appear in that library. This way he wouldn't be on camera sending the email, nor could it be traced to him individually. At best they could only suspect him, which doesn't make him lose the bet. Izuku decided to pick the initial heroes he wanted to do, which was going to be the heroes that worked at UA themselves. Izuku had learned over the time he spent with 𝗣𝗲𝗺 that Eraserhead was a teacher at the school as well, which wasn't known by anyone really except heroes, which would help throw the principal off slightly since no normal person would know the information. One of 𝗣𝗲𝗺's main advice to Izuku was to always attempt to throw your opponent off guard with false information that you could easily back up even though it wasn't true. For example, since Izuku knew that Eraserhead worked at UA, which tended to be known by mostly heroes or those in the heroic field, then Nizu would likely look there first, which buys Izuku time. He would also be looking for someone that matches that description on the cameras if Nizu looked, which Izuku wouldn't fit, and most people would write him off since he was quirkless as well. So he was backing up the information by planting real clues with false information that would throw Nizu off his tracks. The correct option that is in plain sight tends to not be the option that people select if it sounds foolish or ridiculous with the information they already know. As such, the next day after school, before heading to the dojo, Izuku made a stop at the computer in the library and opened a brand new email account with fake information under his alias. Izuku decided to use the nickname 𝗵𝗃 since Izuku had come to enjoy tea that 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had been making him and teaching him how to make. The reason he was learning how to make tea was due to the countless tea types that help relax the body after large amounts of physical training, or tea that calms people down from being anxious, which has helped Izuku personally a lot. As such, 𝗵𝗃 became his alias for the side gig of these emails. Izuku crafted the first email and started to read it over again before he was ready to send it off. The email read as such: "Hello, Principal Nizu. Due to the nature of my analysis that I have crafted, I believed it was prudent that I send you this information as you are trusted in the hero community and with the police. Attached to this email you will find a separate analysis I have done of all of your staff of UA as a showcase of my work that I can accomplish at my current skill level. Now, I do understand the position you may be in with me providing you this information, since I am unknown, nor do I plan to reveal my identity anytime soon, as I wish to remain hidden for now. However, I believe you can verify the reliability of the information I have provided in these notes, which will allow me to gain a foot in the door with others as I wish to expand to who I can send my work to, but that only works if they are willing to even read and trust it. If you don't wish for me to continue sending you this information, then please let me know and I will cut contact with you. However, I would greatly welcome feedback on my skills that I have shown in these notes that I have provided, even if you don't wish to forward them to anyone that was written about. Thanks. Download attached documents. Overall, Izuku liked the initial email he was sending out and knew that he didn't promise to not send the information to other people since he would lose the bet if he didn't keep doing this. As such, that was off the table right from the start, but if Principal 𝗍𝗂 didn't want the information, then it would be his loss if Izuku found other heroes that accepted the information, since he would soon turn into providing analysis on villains as well, but he wanted his foot in the door with someone first before that. Izuku looked over it one more time before he decided to hit send, and then the email was off. Though, before Izuku left, he grabbed some books in a section that was in the blind spot of the camera, so it wouldn't look too weird that he came in and didn't leave with a book checked out or something, since he was in the blind spot for so long. Izuku also did make sure that the books he did take did have some value for him, as the section near the blind spot was about human biology, which he knew he needed to learn when using a sword for attacks in non-lethal spots. Training with his master only did so much if he didn't know the spots himself, but only had them pointed out, as the body does move and things inside slightly move as well. Now it's been about a day since Izuku had sent that email off, and we could find one Principal 𝗍𝗂 sitting at his desk reading the email. Overall, 𝗍𝗂 was interested, concerned, and thrilled as well. The reason he was interested was that the notes were indeed quite well and were on the level of a professional. There was some work that needed to be done on them to make them better, but the notes could end up matching 𝗍𝗂's own personal notes that he has done on heroes before, but it wasn't his personal preference to do things like that. 𝗍𝗂 knew he was more drawn to planning and strategy than individual analysis of people. He did employ it on criminals and villains that he was working on, but outside of that, he didn't do much with individual analysis if he didn't need to for a case. 𝗍𝗂 was also concerned since he didn't know who this individual was, which raised concerns about how this individual gained this deep level of information about his staff. This was especially true in regards to one individual staff person called Eraserhead, who was an underground pro hero who no one should really know about unless they were in the heroic field, but even then most didn't know unless they worked with Eraserhead before or other underground heroes. There was the fact that Eraserhead did his job quite well in staying hidden from the media, as Eraserhead also had any videos of him that he found removed from the internet. This was to help keep a lid on information about him, since the less that knew how his quirk worked the better, but sitting right in front of 𝗍𝗂 is an in-depth analysis of the man and his quirk. Oh, this is quite interesting. 𝗍𝗂 thought as he finished looking through all of the analysis of all of his staff. There were quite a few suggestions in the notes to make their quirks stronger or ways to overcome their weaknesses. For example, on Eraserhead's, there was a suggestion to tie his hair up before going out in the field, since his hair is an indication of when his quirk is activated even though he covers his eyes. As such, someone could time his quirk going on and off to find the gap between it if they had enough time to observe the hero in the field and plan an attack on the said hero. The other emotion that 𝗍𝗂 had was being thrilled, since 𝗬𝗎𝗄𝗃 was a puzzle to solve. 𝗍𝗂 really loved solving puzzles, which 𝗬𝗎𝗄𝗃 has presented as one, since 𝗍𝗂 needed to figure out the individual's identity and maybe even employ them as well due to the level of work they had shown. It would also provide 𝗍𝗂 some chaos, as he wasn't going to tell people he was not making these and would leave it up to individuals to ask him if he did them or not. It would be fun to see people's expressions that it all came from another person instead of him. As such, 𝗍𝗂 started to laugh his crazy laugh as he drank his tea and wondered if 𝗬𝗎𝗄𝗃 would enjoy a good cup of tea when 𝗍𝗂 found him based on the alias that the unknown individual had taken. The staff that heard the laugh avoided going near the principal's office, as they didn't want involved with whatever was going on in that room, but sadly for them they were going to be dragged into it one way or another. As Izuku was heading towards the dojo the day that 𝗍𝗂 read the emails, he had a chill go up the back of his spine and wondered what caused it. He didn't know, so he shrugged it off, not knowing the utter chaos he had started to create by 𝗍𝗂 reading his emails that day. Izuku entered the dojo and got to work on his training that he had come to enjoy so much. It's been several months since Izuku had started his side gig of being a freelance analysis of heroes and villains, which he has always sent to Principal 𝗍𝗂 of UA. To say it wasn't interesting would be a lie, in all honesty, as Principal 𝗍𝗂 has been trying to dig clues out of any words that Izuku had said in his emails. It was honestly entertaining to Izuku, and 𝗣𝗲𝗺 even found it amusing that Izuku was giving the principal of UA the loop on his identity by planting fake clues in the emails that sent him off Izuku's trail. Now, nothing Izuku said was a lie, but the implications that Izuku made sure that 𝗎𝗎 would make would not be accurate. For example, 𝗎𝗎 had one point asked if Izuku had a job, and Izuku confirmed that he indeed had a job, since 𝗣𝗲𝗺 said that the freelance work he was doing as tea leaves was a job even though he wasn't getting paid for it. There were also other things as well that Izuku would say that threw 𝗎𝗎 off the trail, but in all honesty Izuku was aiming to win the bet he had with 𝗣𝗲𝗺 since he wanted to claim his master's sword as his own. Izuku has also started to learn more and more about weapons handling since his master had deemed him ready to start learning about them. Izuku had a decent core strength built up over the time that had passed, so he was judged to be ready for weapons handling. Overall, Izuku wasn't in top physical condition on where he needs to be before he goes for the UA exam roughly 4 years from now, but he was starting to get there, which was the point of the training. 𝗣𝗲𝗺 was satisfied with Izuku's current progress, which is why he added the weapons training onto the list of things Izuku was doing under him. As such, Izuku was learning the handling of swords and other weapons, as we could see as we arrive in the dojo, where Izuku was swinging the sword back and forth to help build up the muscles that would be used more often when using weapons like a sword. For example, normal training doesn't really help you build up the muscle fibers in your hands, which is highly needed if you're going to be gripping a sword. If you don't have a good grip, then that sword is going to fly out of your hands, or your opponent might steal it from you, which means your death. As such, Izuku was swinging a training sword back and forth to start building up the muscles that he would need in the correct areas outside of his other physical training. 𝗣𝗲𝗺 was also watching Izuku from the side, and on occasions, he would throw random blunted throwing weapons at Izuku. The reason for this was to help build up Izuku's situational awareness around himself so he could be prepared for anything that might come his way during a fight. For example, you could be fighting one opponent in an alley and 𝗬𝗎𝗺 would come out from a blind spot, so you needed to be able to listen in and feel for anything that might be off to keep yourself alive. 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had made sure Izuku remembers that being quirkless was nothing to be ashamed of, but to always remember that he was at a disadvantaged starting point that needed to be overcome via external tools and the tools of his body, such as his body's natural strength and mind. Even though Izuku was born quirkless, it didn't mean that his body wasn't more evolved than humans 200 years ago, as he still passed genes from his parents. Human bodies became more and more sturdy to handle quirks, which even he had those genes. As such, what normal humans could do nowadays would seem extreme back 200 years ago when quirks weren't around, since the human bodies did still evolve even if Izuku didn't have a quirk. Izuku always remembered that and would always be training in something at any given moment that he could, since he knew he had a limited amount of time before the entrance exam for UA, so he needed to push his body to the limits that he had so they would expand to even higher limits. Izuku also started to have a decent base set of skills in regards to wielding weapons, but it wouldn't compare to masters like 𝗣𝗲𝗺, who could easily overpower him or defeat him with his sword skills. As such, Izuku kept building his skills up each and every single day that he would appear at the dojo. Now, outside of those skills that he started to build up, there was also the fact that Izuku had been learning to apply his analysis skills in real combat, since 𝗣𝗲𝗺 would get him set up with fights with completely random people. Izuku had wondered where the people were coming from, since they didn't seem like they came from an actual dojos or something else. No, they did indeed not come from another dojo or something normal. Instead, Izuku was completely shocked to learn where they were coming from, but accepted it in the end. As it turns out, due to the fact that 𝗣𝗲𝗺's Pro Hero license was still active, he would go out and hunt down random criminals in the streets and make them a deal depending on what he caught them doing and their background history, which he would look up. That is how Izuku found himself fighting all of these random people, as most of them got caught trying to buy drugs, steal random things, break into things, or miscellaneous crimes that didn't really harm others directly. The deal 𝗣𝗲𝗺 made was that as long as they fought Izuku and didn't cause any serious or lethal wounds, then they would get to walk away, as 𝗣𝗲𝗺 wouldn't arrest them for whatever crime he caught them for that day. The criminals were allowed to use their quirks or other weapons that 𝗣𝗲𝗺 would provide them, which shocked both Izuku and the criminal, but the criminal didn't care in the end as long as 𝗣𝗲𝗺 upheld his side of the deal, which he always did. As such, some word of him spread in the local villains of a pro-hero sword master catching criminals for his student to fight and being let off as long as they didn't commit any major crimes in their past. 𝗣𝗲𝗺 even paid them several thousand yen as well due to their services and let them off with a written warning to not commit their offense again, which was perfect for them since it was that or sitting in jail if they didn't agree to fight his student. As such, they agreed to fight Izuku and got paid for it as well, though the government or others didn't need to know about getting paid to fight the said student. This overall helped Izuku gain a lot of real combat experience, as 𝗣𝗲𝗺 told Izuku he would not get involved regardless of the wounds he received unless he was in mortal danger. All of the villains went after Izuku with the intention of harming him, since 𝗣𝗲𝗺 would not get involved as long as they didn't take it too far and endanger the student's life. There were some incidents a few times where the criminals/villains decided to get a lot of courage and decided to try to kill Izuku, which made 𝗣𝗲𝗺 interfere in the events right at the last second before the knife came down on Izuku's heart or throat. Izuku did have some traumatizing memories from those incidents, but 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had helped Izuku through them. Izuku could remember his master's world on why this was going on. If you don't do this, then you will be even further behind those at UA or other hero schools. They have spent years learning their quirks, which they use as weapons, while you only had the training to wield a sword or other weapons but couldn't get experience in applying it to others. This fighting experience will make your fighting abilities be more natural and instinctive like people with their quirks. 𝗣𝗲𝗺 told Izuku when they had started to do all of the training, which made sense. If Izuku could act naturally with his swords or other weapons, then it wasn't much different from a quirk, as some quirks had limited usage outside of certain things. Those criminals that tried to really harm Izuku past superficial wounds would end up staying in prison for a much longer time, since 𝗣𝗲𝗺 could land them with attempted murder charges and it was his word against theirs. As such, even though 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had recruited them to fight his discipline, they were still fully at fault for the attempted murder attempts, which pissed them off, but they had nothing to go on to get at Izuku, and 𝗣𝗲𝗺 was too strong for them. 𝗣𝗲𝗺 always made Izuku wear a mask that covered his hair and face when he was fighting the criminals, so they couldn't go after him, and they never conducted these types of lessons in the dojo itself, so the criminals had no idea where to track them down either, since 𝗣𝗲𝗺 would use different warehouses or other locations for these fights. Izuku felt this was extremely illegal, but in the end, he just shrugged it off, since it was providing him a lot of real combat experience that he would need to survive in the hero field. They have also been doing these types of lessons for about a year now, as they started when he turned 10 years old and he was now closing in on 11. According to 𝗣𝗲𝗺, Izuku was at a level that he deemed acceptable for his sword usage, and they were now heading off to get him certified to wield a sword in public. Now, Izuku could wait to be in a hero school to get certification, but why would they do that when they could get as much as his certification out of the way beforehand, which would allow him more free time to focus on other training while he was at UA, since 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had always been a limelight hero. As such, the man didn't know how to teach the underground aspects of the hero field to Izuku as best as he could. No, they would need to rely on UA to do that, while 𝗣𝗲𝗺 teaches Izuku everything else that he can teach. As such, about a month after 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had deemed Izuku acceptable in using his sword, they arrived at a testing center that people had to display their skills at to verify that they were able to use their sword before they received the certification. Now you would think, how could someone wield a sword in public so easily with just getting a certification? But it didn't really matter due to quirks. People spent less time thinking about things like guns or swords, even though they were as lethal as some quirks were, but the rules and laws were far more relaxed since people became dependent on quirk usage. After waiting a bit, a lady came in and called them into the test room. Izuku would be fighting against several other people with very dulled blades so as not to cause much damage if a blow was successfully landed on them. They did also wear an outfit to catch the blows as well to decrease the odds of receiving a fatal wound. They asked him why he was wanting to receive the certification, and Izuku told them that he planned to go to UA for the hero course, as he wanted to be able to use any and all weapons, as he could find himself in a situation where a quirk counters his fighting style or something else happens. Izuku of course didn't tell them of his quirk status, nor did they ask, since it wasn't a requirement for them to know, but he did have to list it on the paperwork if he passed the certification. Izuku knew he might face some discrimination once they saw the paperwork, but 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 promised he would back him up, and Izuku believed his master, as the man had always been there for Izuku when he needed him. As such, Izuku took the certification exam, and it was eventful, to say the least. Izuku ended the fight quickly due to his mind and skills that 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 had taught him, and defeated the two opponents within a few minutes, which shocked everyone. They had to get him to take another test since they couldn't see much of his overall skills at wielding the sword in that short time frame. As such, 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 suggested to them all that he fight his student since he was a pro hero and had a certificate for wielding a sword as well. They accepted, and soon it turned into a full-on match between the two of them, which lasted 30 minutes before Izuku felt the blade at his neck from his master. They accepted the results, and soon they were working on paperwork, which is when the fact that Izuku was quirkless came out. The two he beat earlier complained that he had to cheat since there was no way a quirkless child could beat them. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 started to chuckle, which caught their attention. "Are you telling me you wish to deny my protégé his earned certification due to him being quirkless?" 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said, and the two paled as they remembered the man as a hero and that Izuku was his personal student. They kept their mouths silent and left as 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 turned his head to the lady. "Now, I will make this clear. I will check in on the paperwork once it had been filled, and if I find anything wrong with it, I will come back here to arrest people for quirk discrimination and anything else I can find, which is quite easy to do with the numerous laws these days. The certification better clear and have no issues. Do I make myself clear?" 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said with a cold tone, and the worker nodded her head as she started the paperwork and finished it with Izuku finishing what he needed. The offer worker said the paperwork would all be passed in the system within the next week or two, depending on the government's speed. Soon they left, and Izuku sighed. "The amount of discrimination is really stupid. I've forgotten some of it since you never treat me unfairly and I only suffer the normal stuff at school and other places," Izuku muttered as the both of them were walking to an ice cream shop since 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 wanted to reward Izuku for passing. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 sighed as well and patted Izuku's head. The man had come to see Izuku as a grandson, and Izuku saw him as a grandfather that he never had. Izuku knew he would face a sheer amount of discrimination in the future before society started to accept quirkless people more, even though there were so few of them nowadays. Though, once he had a pro hero license, it would be so much easier to make changes since he could easily threaten to arrest people for their crimes against quirkless people, which Izuku would always smile darkly at. Years have passed, and it was now roughly a year before the UA entrance exams. Many things have happened over the years, but one thing that was surprising to Izuku was how famous his alias had become over the years. 𝗬𝗏𝗏s had become well known in the hero industry as a top-notch analysis for quirks and of criminal cases, since Izuku had provided 𝗍𝗏 analysis of villains of active criminal cases in ways to defeat them and likely areas they would be in, which lead to quite a handful of arrests. It had reached the point that 𝗍𝗏 could no longer hide the fact that he wasn't the one actually doing the work and had to inform everyone that he had been passing information from a secondary source called 𝗬𝗏s, who trusted 𝗍𝗏 to verify the information and send the info along to the appropriate sources. Everyone had asked him if he had ever discovered the true name of the person behind 𝗬𝗏s, and 𝗍𝗏 had to admit he hadn't. The information that 𝗍𝗏 had gained didn't lead him to anyone, which he learned that 𝗬𝗏s had thrown him off the trail by feeding him false clues on his identity, but could confirm that the person had no ill will towards heroes and was actively helping them since they provided so much information. It did reach a point in the recent years that 𝗍𝗏 did offer Izuku a job at UA as an analysis, which made Izuku break into laughter when he learned it, and even 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 was shocked when he read it, but also found it extremely funny since Izuku had done such a good job on keeping 𝗍𝗏 off his trail with all of the misleading information. "I got to admit, Izuku, that I've lost the bet. If 𝗍𝗏 didn't figure you out by now, he won't, with the last year coming to a close. I also want you to start getting used to wielding 𝗧𝗏𝗃, since it's a far deadlier blade since it can cut through metals and everything else due to how it was made. As such, I admit defeat with the bet, but I want to see if 𝗍𝗏 suspects anything once you apply to the school, since I want you to reveal it at least after the first day comes to an end, since he will be good for you to come under for personal training in regards to your notebooks and criminal casework, since he is far better at that than me," 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said as he grabbed 𝗧𝗏𝗃 and took it over to Izuku, who took the sword carefully as if it would easily break, which was ironic due to the sword being nearly unbreakable with everything it had gone through. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 just chuckled at Izuku's facial expression as he wielded the sword. Izuku handed over his other sword since he would no longer need it since he only ever wielded one blade even though he knew how to wield two if he really needed to. Wielding one just felt more right to him. Overall, outside of the katana sword that he wielded, Izuku used throwing knives, shuriken, smoke bombs, needles coated with poison, and anything else he could get his hands on in the middle of combat. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 did recommend Izuku look into getting a part of the hero suit to have electrified stun gloves somehow so he could have a bit of power in his punches to stun people to catch them off guard. Izuku thought it was a good idea and made a note of it when it came time to send in a costume when he passed the UA entrance exam since he refused to believe he wouldn't be able to with all of his skill and training. Outside of all that, Izuku had actually switched to online schooling since about a year ago 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 had enough of Izuku's school. The man admitted to himself and Izuku that he should have taken action sooner, but he also knew Izuku would suffer discrimination from a lot of people and even possibly from future classmates at UA even with their anti-discrimination policies and zero tolerance towards bullying. Sadly, that is the world they lived in. However, he drew the line when Izuku had gotten suicide baited by a few of his classmates and the staff did nothing about it. As such, he had Inko pull him out of school and enrolled him into an online school that was self-paced which Izuku quickly passed his education requirements for middle school easily which resulted in him starting his high school education already. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 knew Izuku was highly intelligent and the work he did with his self-paced learning proved it due to how well he was doing which made him smile at the success his protege was having with his education. Izuku would likely have all of his first-year education learned and could test out of it a few months before UA started which would free up some of his time at UA for other training or learning since 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 doubted 𝗵𝘃𝗀 would let Izuku sit idle once the principal of UA learned that Izuku was 𝗬𝗏𝗏s. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 knew from the past that 𝗵𝘃𝗀 had a habit of taking in highly intelligent students as some level of being personal proteges though the results varied. Most couldn't withstand the sheer intensity that 𝗵𝘃𝗀 would produce due to his time of being experimented by humans which he tends to focus a bit more on his personal students. Though, 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 doubted 𝗵𝘃𝗀 did it on purpose since 𝗵𝘃𝗀 had been looking for someone to always challenge his mind. Becoming a personal student of the creature just made it so that 𝗵𝘃𝗀's attention wasn't diluted through all of the staff and students in the school which meant it was far more focused on the said individual which had led to people burning out mentally. Even though no one had been able to handle a full year of being under the creature's guiding hand, all of his past personal students still went on to be very successful in whatever field they entered. Other changes that have happened over the years were that Izuku was very physically fit now as he had packed on firm and dense muscles instead of going bulky like 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 was more like. The reason that 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 had Izuku go for firmer muscles and density was due to the fact that Izuku was not going into limelight heroics. He was also needing to be faster and stealthier at night. Bulkier muscles would make him stand a bit more out at night time, unlike denser muscles which would allow him to slip into tight spaces to sneak into places or hide. Overall, 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 was proud of how far his protege had come in his training from physical conditioning, weapons training, martial arts, and analytical skills. Now, there were only 10 months left before UA's entrance exam would start. As such, 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 had the last training regiment that he wanted Izuku to accomplish before going to UA. This would be a bit taxing but would be a great boost to his physical state. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 took Izuku on a small trip and they soon arrived at a certain beach which Izuku coughed and choked at due to the smell. This beach was filled with trash and it was called 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗏 Municipal Beach Park. Now, we have roughly 10 months left before the UA entrance exam and as the last training for your physical state that I want you to do is that I want you to clean this entire beach on top of all of the other training I have you do. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said. Now, we have roughly 10 months left before the UA entrance exam and as the last training for your physical state that I want you to do is that I want you to clean this entire beach on top of all of the other training I have you do. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said as he looked at Izuku with a grin who paled a bit at being surrounded by the entire trash-filled beach with its horrible smell. Izuku sighed but nodded his head as he jumped straight into the work and asked where he was going to be putting the trash at which 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said in a dumpster which had pulled up roughly as he said that as the truck with the dumpster arrived and started to drop it on the street. Soon you could find Izuku spending all of his months on the beach as he began to move all of the trash. It was a large amount of work that even he was surprised with, as he could feel every single muscle in his body getting a workout. This would be an amazing project for a lot of people to do if they wanted to get fit. Izuku said as he thought about Katsuki Bakugo, which was his mother's friend's child. He kind of missed Katsuki Bakugo, who he called Kaken, but sadly for Izuku, Bakugo had gotten a bit of a temper and aggressive issues that he picked up from his school. As such, Bakugo acted like the bullies that always picked on Izuku and said he could never be a hero, which honestly devastated Izuku a bit, as he did care for Katsuki Bakugo, as he thought of the boy as a family member due to how close their mothers were. It wasn't surprising when Bakugo grew out of the phase of believing Izuku could be a hero from when he was younger, as the last time Izuku talked to Bakugo was about a year after meeting with 𝗣𝗲𝗺. This meant that Katsuki and Izuku haven't talked for about 4 or so years now, with it closing in on 5 years. Bakugo had told Izuku that a quirkless person could never become a pro hero and that he should accept it. After that day, Izuku decided to cut contact with Bakugo, and he does admit he misses the person he saw as a family member, but he wasn't going to allow such toxic thoughts to be around him all the time, as Izuku wanted nothing to do with him if Katsuki Bakugo kept that toxic thinking up. Izuku's aunt non-biological had asked Izuku why he had suddenly cut off contact with Katsuki, who had been displeased, and according to his Mitsuki, Bakugo had gone into a rage of Izuku not responding to him anymore. Izuku simply told her that due to views that Katsuki had expressed to him, that he didn't desire anything from his little brother figure anymore if he continued down his line of thinking. Izuku still saw him as a little brother, but Izuku was honestly hurt by Bakugo's words more than all of the bullies through his normal day due to how close Bakugo was to Izuku. Izuku had thought Bakugo would have been better than that, since he was quite sure that his parents didn't raise him to behave like that. However, he would hope that Bakugo would grow out of them one day, since if things went as he hoped, Bakugo would be in his first year when Izuku should be in his third year at UA when he passes the biased exam, which was robots based on the words of his master. Anyway, back to the actual training. The months passed by and the trash got smaller and smaller as he made his way through it all. One day though, Izuku ran into a younger boy by a year or so that had asked him what he was doing. The boy's name was Miro Togata, who Izuku felt had a bright smile which made him chuckle. Izuku explained to the boy, who told Izuku to just call him by his first name, which Izuku agreed to do. Soon, it was decided that the boy would join Izuku in cleaning the beach, since 𝗣𝗲𝗺 approved it, since Izuku had already cleared 75% of the beach by himself. Getting a helper would speed it up and allow Izuku to relax and just maintain himself before the entrance exam. Izuku had also learned about Miro's quirk, which was called permeation, which was quite amazing in Izuku's view. Miro had thought it was a weak quirk, which Izuku called bullshit on, since it wasn't a weak quirk at all. Miro had talked about how the quirk couldn't be used to combat or other things, since he would slip out of his clothing and fall into the ground. Izuku shook his head and explained why it was a powerful quirk. Overall, you just lack control right now. With the right training and combat style, you would be hard-pressed to find someone to beat you. The fact you can go through anything and get to things like underground bunkers, safes, or heavily guarded buildings means you have so much power at your hands, as they are nothing in front of you once you master control. A weak quirk would be something that can't really be built upon no matter how much hard work someone puts into it. Izuku said, and then used Bakugo's quirk as an example as he asked Miro if he thought an explosion quirk was a weak or powerful quirk. Miro had said it was a powerful one and listed why. Indeed, but did you know said explosions didn't happen until after years of training by said quirk user? At the start, they could only make what was more or less sparkle, but the user built their quirk up and can now create large explosions that are more controlled. You just need to build up your control and create a fighting style to go with it. I suggest practicing in a forest, since there are a lot of trees to avoid or move through. If you get into UA, ask them to look into making your hero outfit and some clothing like gym uniform made of your DNA, since it should work with your quirk due to it containing your DNA, which your quirk should sync up with. Izuku suggested, and Miro thanked Izuku for the suggestions. Izuku honestly felt insulted when Miro called his quirk weak, since Izuku knew it was a fearsome quirk if Miro put the work into training his control of it with a correct battle style, as Izuku would love to have that quirk over being quirkless. Izuku could think of so many applications of the quirk, such as chasing a villain down by not having to go around buildings, hiding away from gas quirks, or even use it to spy on people through different rooms or from outside of a building since he could bypass security. Soon a few more months passed and it was now 2 months before UA would start and the beach was cleaned. Izuku told Miro he had to leave since he needed to prepare for high school exams and wouldn't be coming to the beach activity anymore. Miro nodded his head and thanked Izuku for all of the advice he had given over the months as he had gained a base control of his quirk at a better rate than he was doing on his own due to the advice Izuku had given. After Izuku had left, Miro realized he never knew what school Izuku was applying to or his actual name. Miro only realized it since Miro had taken to calling Izuku by the nickname of 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗀𝗺, and when Izuku left he was going to say his name and say goodbye but realized he didn't actually have his actual name, which left Miro confused as hell on how he went so many months without knowing it. In all honesty, it was a part of 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗺's training that Izuku was given to always try to avoid giving people his actual name and have them call him something else without them realizing it. This was for the future when he went by an alias instead of his actual name as an underground hero, as his real name was something he needed to guard since villains in the underground tended to be more vengeful sometimes, unlike villains during the limelight hours which tended to be villains of opportunity, unlike the organized crime that happened at night. These types of criminals belonged to organizations that would want to take revenge against a hero that destroyed their operations if you didn't take them all out. Even then they might try to come after you if they ever escaped prison, since who likes to be trapped inside of a cell for most of their lives? No one, which is why 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗺 had Izuku practice on Miro on not giving his real name out. This way Izuku could learn to divert people's attention away from important details that he didn't want others to learn of. As such, Izuku had successfully prevent Miro from learning of his real name and only knew his face, which in the future Izuku would be wearing a mask when he did his work, so Miro would likely never put the pieces together. RDPOV. The remaining months before the UA entrance exam had passed and Izuku had actually completed many things in these remaining months. Some of these things were that he completed and tested out of most basic high school first-year education. Another thing was that Izuku had completed his certification to wield and use guns. Izuku didn't purchase a gun, but he did keep his training up when he could at a gun range that 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗺 had taken Izuku to, which was owned by an old friend that wouldn't discriminate against Izuku due to being quirkless. Overall, this meant Izuku could use nearly any weapon he wanted to, due to the fact that other support gear didn't require certification to use them, which was so stupid since people with their quirks could be far more dangerous than a sword and gun. There was also the fact that some quirks were like swords or guns as well, yet they didn't need a certificate to use those quirks if they went into heroics. Anyway, outside of that stuff, Izuku had created a deal with Principal 𝗍𝗍 to see if the principal could uncover his identity before Izuku decided to just expose it to the principal. 𝗍𝗍 of course accepted the deal and asked what was being wagered. Izuku told 𝗍𝗍 it would be a favor that either side could ask of each other that was within the individual's power to accomplish, which 𝗍𝗍 agreed with since 𝗍𝗍 has been wanting to obtain tea leaves at UA, which Izuku has been ignoring. Though, 𝗍𝗍 would soon find out that he would have tea leaves far easier than he had thought compared to all of the work he had put in over the past few years. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗺 laughed and asked Izuku what he would ask of 𝗍𝗍 if he won, which 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗺 saw happening. Izuku thought about it and said he wouldn't ask to become 𝗍𝗍's personal student since they both knew the principal wouldn't stand around while Izuku was in UA with having completed and tested out of all of his basic first-year academics. That was too much for the principal to put aside. No, Izuku was debating on asking Principal 𝗍𝗍 to help hide the fact that Izuku was quirkless from spreading, since Izuku didn't want the public to put attention to him until he was already a pro hero, since if he became a pro hero before they could object, then he would have a track record which he could use to defend himself against anyone that demanded his license to be revoked. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗺 nodded his head at this idea and accepted it since it would be a good idea. There was no way that Izuku would be able to hide it from the staff since they would have access to his student files, but Izuku might be able to keep it on the down low with his fellow students, but sooner or later it was going to get out with them unless Izuku came up with some sort of lie that the teachers wouldn't spoil if he got lucky, or lie by omission such as distracting everyone from his quirks with his analysis, and people might think that it was his quirk. Anyway, the remaining time had passed and it was time for the entrance exam, as Izuku now finds himself standing outside of the school. Izuku really wishes he could bring in his sword or something, but support gear was only allowed if it aided their quirks. As such, Izuku was wearing his gloves to help protect them from punching the robots. 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had told Izuku to use his mind and aim for weaknesses, check overall information he was presented, but to also be a hero, but wouldn't say anything more than that. Izuku knew if he was lucky, he could find a broken part of a robot or something in the test to use as a weapon, but first it was time for the written portion of the exam to start. Izuku made his way to the check-in station and got everything sorted before he headed off towards the area he was directed in and sat down in his seat he was assigned when he arrived in the testing location. 30 minutes later, the entire room was filled up with people loudly talking without a care in the world until a staff person walked in, which turned out to be the pro hero Midnight. She handed out everyone's tests as they all silenced themselves since they were starting. She told them all that if they were caught cheating they would be removed and banned from the school. Minutes into the test had passed out of the hour and a half they were given, and Izuku was already done. He got up and turned his test into Midnight, who was shocked at how soon Izuku was completed. "Are you sure you are done? Don't want to look it over one more time?" Midnight asked, and Izuku shook his head as he said he was done and had reviewed it several times already. She nodded her head and dismissed him to head to the auditorium since he still had some time before the next portion would start. Some staff saw Izuku and wondered how he was done so fast, but shrugged as they saw him sit down in the auditorium. The time quickly passed and the other students all arrived into the room as 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 walked in. He asked if they all had the pamphlets that were in the pocket in front of them. After waiting for anyone to say they didn't, he started to speak, though Izuku had found the pamphlet when he arrived in the room and had read every single detail of it. He was quite shocked and surprised to see that there was a lot of information in the pamphlets that they gave out. For example, there were shut-off buttons on the robots. "I can see why Master said to always check the information I was given, since I bet most people didn't know about the shut-off features on these robots any of the years, nor will people read all of the details this year." Izuku thought in his mind, and he was right, as he saw nearly every single person near him not even look at the material that they were given, but only watched 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃. As he watched 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 give the presentation in front of everyone, one student had asked about the fact that there were 4 robots but only 3 shown on the screen, which made Izuku roll his eyes as 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 wasn't done speaking, which the boy sat down in shame as the hero explained the remaining robot as a time waster due to not being worth points itself. As he watched 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 give the presentation in front of everyone, one student had asked about the fact that there were 4 robots but only 3 shown on the screen, which made Izuku roll his eyes as 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 wasn't done speaking, which the Soon the explanation came to an end as 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 dismissed them all out to the buses that would be taking them all to their test sites, as the training ground had been split into different sections, so each bus would go to its own gate to enter the test site. Izuku was a bit nervous but calmed himself down with the breathing techniques that 𝗣𝗲𝗺 taught him so he wouldn't waste breath during combat. These breathing techniques were also good for stopping a panic attack as well. Soon they were all standing in front of the gates to the test center, and the words that 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had taught Izuku were going through Izuku's mind. There is no go in heroics. There is no rest for heroes. Danger can always be present. Be prepared to fight for your life with each encounter, as you should never underestimate your enemy. Anything unknown should be considered lethal, were all the different types of advice that 𝗣𝗲𝗺 had been drilling into Izuku's mind over the years. As such, the moment Izuku saw 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 come out on the gate and the gates start opening, Izuku charged right in without waiting for the man to say anything, as there was no real go in heroics. Everyone around Izuku was confused as hell about him entering the test site before the pro hero said go, but it was about a minute before they heard 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 speak up. "There is no go in heroics," the man yelled. The reason it took an entire minute for the hero to say anything was due to how shocked the hero was when he saw the green-haired kid aka Izuku Midoriya run in right as the gate started to open. They have had people go in once the gate was fully open or halfway, but for it to happen right as it started to open was an entirely different thing, which shocked the hero. After 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 had told everyone else to go, they all rushed into the test site, but Izuku had a lead already as he was breaking robots apart left and right. Now you might wonder how he is doing this without a strength enchantment or a quirk. Well, after defeating the first robot by hitting the shut-off button after dodging the missiles it sent, Izuku took the robot apart by using his strength he had trained over the years and grabbed a large metal piece from the main spine area of the robot. With this, he used it in a similar manner to a sword. As such, he was using it to stab the other robots in the eyes, which broke the controls on them and shut them down, or applied enough force as he hit the neck on the 2 pointers, which crushed the wires inside the robot. It was as 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said, even if Izuku didn't have a quirk, the human body still evolved like everyone else did compared to humans 200 years ago before quirks appeared. With all of the training he had done in building up firm and dense muscles, Izuku had a decent amount of force behind each of his blows, combined with his speed made his strikes fearsome. It didn't compare to a true strength enhancer quirk, but compared to those without strength quirks that didn't focus on building their bodies up, he would hold an advantage. This meant he held an advantage on a lot of people physically, since people were so reliant on quirks these days. Now, while this was going on, the heroes in the control room were all sitting and watching as 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 had come back in. Did you all see that one green hair kid that blasted off right as the gates opened? 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 said, and others nodded their heads as they watched the screens. The green hair kid did indeed catch their attention and even caught 𝗍𝗁's slightly as the man looked at his profile and was intrigued by what he saw. The green hair kid was Izuku Midoriya, but that isn't what caught his eye. No, it was the fact that the current person in the lead for villain points for his area was Quirkless. 𝗍𝗁 put the file aside for now so that the others couldn't see it until after the exam was over, since he didn't want judgments being made. He wanted his staff to watch the boy without other thoughts going in their minds. Even Eraserhead was watching the green hair kid, which 𝗍𝗁 caught from the side glance he made. Oh, I wonder if he will pass, since there is still time left for others to catch up. 𝗍𝗁 thought, and he was right, as others with quirks were indeed catching up to his score and decreasing his lead that he held with 5 minutes left in the test. Though 𝗍𝗁 did notice a few times that Izuku Midoriya had defeated robots that were about to attack people from the back, which without a doubt had earned him some rescue points. Then it was time to hit the big red button that released the 0 pointer into the test sites. All of the staff watched the true hidden test to see if anyone would try to act heroically, as the rescue points were not mentioned to others. Even after passing the exam, most people didn't learn of the rescue points, since most didn't talk about it, which has helped UA keep it a secret from the public. Overall, it went as they all suspected, as everyone just ran away from the robot. However, Izuku Midoriya didn't run away. Oh, he isn't running away? 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗏 pointed out to Izuku Midoriya, and they wondered what he was doing. They watched him go to a robot on the ground and start messing with it until the robot stood back up, which shocked them all. What shocked 𝗍𝗁 the most was that he saw on his little control panel that the missiles all got armed to fire at the same time, and then 𝗍𝗁 realized what he was doing. Oh, so that is your plan, 𝗍𝗁 said, and the staff asked what he meant, but he pointed, and right as they all looked at Izuku Midoriya, they saw all of the rockets fly off the robot and went right drive track of the 0 pointer, which made it slow down to a crawl as most of the left drive track had been broken. It still could move, but not even to keep people in danger, as everyone could escape much easier now. Izuku nodded his head and walked away as he helped people that were on the ground around him. The staff were impressed, as Izuku had decided to slow the robot down instead of challenging it, since it didn't look like he had a way to defeat it. He chooses to leave the villain to someone more capable of defeating it, but found a plan to slow it down which enables the others to escape, which in the real world is a viable strategy to employ on villains if you can't overcome them yourself. 𝗍𝗁 said with a cheerful tone, as Izuku Midoriya had caught his attention. 𝗍𝗁 had looked at the boy's score and saw that he was the highest score for the written test, and noticed that Izuku had also tested out of all his first-year normal education classes, which would free up a large amount of time. 𝗍𝗁 was honestly considering offering the boy a few private lessons throughout the semester, since Izuku had shown some intelligence, and the fact he was quirkless made it even more appealing due to the fact that Izuku had no quirk that helped him come up with that plan or perform so well in the exam. The staff though asked what Izuku's quirk was, which made 𝗍𝗁 grin at them all. What do you think it is? Because right now I can tell you he passed the written exam and he has scored enough villain points to be placed in the 20th position, which doesn't include hero points. As such, he will be in the hero course regardless. 𝗍𝗁 said with a huge grin, since he already did the math for Izuku's written score and physical score. There was zero way for Izuku to fail to get into the hero course due to how well Izuku Midoriya had performed. The staff though didn't like the smile on their boss's face but started to give guesses. Everyone said it was most likely a mental quirk, and even Eraserhead had to agree that it was most likely a mental quirk, which shocked everyone that he got interested in this, but 𝗍𝗫 knew he would be since someone without a physical quirk had just passed the exam, which made him notice the boy. Eraserhead himself failed to pass the exam when he attended school and had to go through the sports festival to get into the hero course. So of course the man would be interested in a boy that did what he couldn't do without showing any visible quirk. I'm afraid he doesn't have a mental quirk. Want to take another guess? 𝗍𝗫 asked, and they all shrugged, and even Izuku Eraserhead was confused since there were no signs of a physical. No signs of a quirk. 𝗍𝗫 said it wasn't a mental quirk? Does that mean he's... Izuku's eyes widened with his guess, and 𝗍𝗫 noticed. Would you like to share with the class Shoyuta Izuku, since I believe you figured it out? 𝗍𝗫 asked with a huge grin on his face, which only confirmed the man's thoughts as he got up out of his bag and asked for the file. I think I know, and I wondered how the hell it's possible. Give me the file, Izuku asked, and 𝗍𝗫 smirked and handed the file over as everyone watched the interaction between the two and then saw Izuku's eyes widen a bit as he closed the file. Congratulations on being right. I take it you want him in your class since his notes on his application to the school say he wants to become an underground hero instead of a limelight, which is smart on his part. You are teaching 1A this year after all. 𝗍𝗫 said, and the man thought for only a second but nodded his head. Indeed, I want him. He's being logical since the public would eat him alive since there has never been a Quirkless Pro Hero in Japan before. It's better if he goes underground and we try to keep his identity under wraps until he can graduates. Izuku said as he gave the file back to 𝗍𝗫, and everyone in the room broke out into shouts of asking if the boy truly was quirkless, and 𝗍𝗫 just provided his file. They were all downright shocked. Add to the fact that if my math is right on his score and others before reviewing everyone. He placed first in the physical exam overall with the rescue points added in and first in the written exam. We are witnessing history be made as a quirkless person had just passed UA's entrance exam while so many people with a quirk failed to do so. Principal 𝗍𝗫 said and broke out into laughter as he sipped his tea that came out of nowhere. Everyone in the room was scared of the future since 𝗍𝗫 seems to have taken a liking to Izuku Midoriya already, and they would be even more scared when they learned who Izuku Midoriya truly was. No one would be able to save them. Now while all of that was going on in the control room, Izuku was walking out of the test site and decided to head to the dojo first before heading home. He texted his mother that he was going to stop there first and how he felt about the exam. Soon the short train ride passed and he found himself entering the dojo, and right as he did that he ducked down and dogged to the left before quickly jumping in the air. The reason he did this was that his master 𝗍𝗲𝗺 came at him with an actual sword from the side, and when Izuku dodged to the other side he triggered a device that sent some knives at him, but he dodged them by grabbing the portion of the ceiling and hiding from other attacks as he scanned the room for other traps. Good job. Though, you could have thrown a knife or something at me when you dodged. 𝗍𝗲𝗺 said, and Izuku rolled his eyes. Remember, I don't have those on me since I had to take the exam. Didn't need to forget them and get accused of cheating. Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗲𝗺 remembered that he indeed left them at the dojo the day before. As such, they fell into a small conversation about how the exam went as Izuku explained what happened. 𝗍𝗲𝗺 told Izuku he was proud of how well he did, and even if he somehow failed there was a way via the sports festival to get into the hero course. After the exam had been completed, several weeks had passed with Izuku spending nearly all of his time at the dojo with 𝗍𝗲𝗺 when he could to keep his training up and enhancing his skills overall. However, one day when he was at home resting, his mother came in and he asked her what was wrong as she was freaking out until he saw the envelope in her hands. It was the letter from UA, and he took it as he asked if he could do it alone in his room, which she agreed as she waited in the hallway. Izuku was anxious and worried as he didn't want all of the training his master had done for him to go to waste. Even though Izuku had so much confined on passing, he still feared that UA may discriminate against him even though they allowed quirkless people to try for the exam. Who would blame Izuku for being worried since the only people that didn't discriminate against him were his mother, his master, and the two adults of the Bakugo family who didn't know what Izuku had been doing since his mother had kept herself tight-lipped about it as Izuku's request. Izuku was silent for a few moments before he opened the letter, and he soon found a metal disc device thing. Izuku was confused about what it was until it started up and projected a video on the wall in front of him. Greetings. Am I a rat? A dog? A bear? Who knows, but I am the principal of 𝗍𝗲𝗎𝗍. I am here to congratulate you Izuku Midoriya on passing the written exam with the highest score in UA history of 99% and achieving a total score of 185 points in the physical exam, which is 5 points higher than 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗃 high score, making you UA's new record holder. You might question how this is, but UA had a hidden portion of the exam where you gained a heavy amount of points due to how many people you recused, said Principal Nizu on the screen as he showed videos of Izuku's saving people as he destroyed robots, but then also what he did to the zero-pointer robot in the exam. These are called rescue points, as UA wants more than just destruction of robots, but those with heroic qualities as well. As such, congratulations on gaining enough points to place first place in the physical exam of UA. Nizu said, and Izuku was in tears now as he not only passed the exam but also outdid 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗃, the symbol of peace, in regards to his record due to how many rescues points he had earned. The screen had shown that Izuku would have placed in 20th place even without the points, which meant so much to Izuku. Izuku had scored 105 reduces points total due to the sheer number of times he had saved people, which meant the other points were all from the robots, which he did via shut-off buttons or break them with the metal piece he used as a sword. Good thing I acted like I normally do when wanting to save people. Izuku thought he kept the focus on the video as he thought of all of this, as the video gave him a pause for a few seconds before Nizu started to speak again. In addition to this, you will be placed in 1A of the hero course under the teaching of Eraserhead. This is due to the fact that you have indicated in the notes you wrote on your application that you wish to be an underground hero, which he can better help you train and give you advice in, as he is an underground pro hero himself. Please find all of the documents in the envelope and send them back with the outfit you wish for your hero costume, as we will need to have it ready before the first combat training. Nizu said, as before he went on to talk about how due to the fact that Izuku had tested out of all the first-year courses that he would need to report to Nizu's office to talk about what they would be doing for his education moving forward after the first day of class. Soon the video came to an end and Izuku broke out into a cheer as he walked out of his room to see his mother. I passed. I did it, and I took first place in the exam, and I took the record for the exam, which means beat 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗃's entrance exam score. Izuku yelled, and 𝗍𝗃𝗃's eyes widened as she hugged her son. She congratulated him and asked if he planned to go see 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 and tell him the results. Izuku said he would go see his teacher now and be back for dinner. 𝗍𝗃 told Izuku to get the man to come over for dinner as well, which he nodded his head at. Soon, Izuku made his way to the dojo and found his master waiting for him with a smile. I can see you passed by your facial expression. How well did you do? 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 asked, and Izuku played the video on the device again, and 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃's eyes widened at the fact that Izuku had beaten 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗃's score due to all of the rescue points he gained. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 nodded his head and smiled as he watched all of the videos that were from the projection. So what are you going to do for your outfit? 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 asked Izuku, who took out a notebook and showed it to his grandfather/teacher. Overall, the outfit would be good to blend in at night, but if he ever acted during the day, he would stand out from others as well. Overall, the outfit would be good to blend in at night, but if he ever acted during the day, he would stand out from others as well. It was like an assassin outfit from an old pre-Quirk game that Izuku stumbled on one day, which would allow Izuku to hide nearly all of his weapons on his body but also provide him the ability to blend in with the night as well. It was like an assassin outfit from an old pre-Quirk game that Izuku stumbled on one day, which would allow Izuku to hide nearly all of his weapons on his body but also provide him the ability to blend in with the night as well. Then, Izuku was going to be wearing a dark gray kitsune mask with a moon design on it, which caught 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃's attention. Then there was also Izuku's main weapon, which was the 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃. Izuku would send his certification in with his paperwork so that Izuku could bring the katana in a covering with him wherever he goes, since people can take their quirks with them, which means Izuku should get to bring his weapon with him as well. Why the moon design on the mask? 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 asked, and Izuku smiled. Well, I decided on a hero name that I want to take on, which will be Kitsune, which some people associate with the moon a bit, and I also didn't just want a pure black mask. The marking would help me better stand out as an individual when villains see me, as I want to create a fearsome persona with them, which should make villains fear me if they hear or see me. Though, I won't be surprised if I get called the Green Kitsune or something due to the amount of green on my outfit and sword. Overall, everything ties together since people can picture a moon when you think of a fox at night. Izuku said, and 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 thought it over and nodded his name as he approved the hero name. It would be an amazing hero name for Izuku to take on, as he believes it would be a good name to make known in the underground world. They both decided to head back to the Midoriya apartment since it was starting to get a bit later in the night. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 was honestly glad that Izuku Midoriya came into his dojo all those years ago, as Izuku had continued to prove himself day in and day out. Now, Izuku had earned his place in the best hero school in Japan due to passing the most biased exam as well, which only proves his worth even more against those that would scoff at Izuku. This is because he earned his place when a quirked person had an entire quirk to use, when Izuku only used his body and the test site just like everyone else could. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 laughed inside of his mind as he couldn't wait to hear the stories that his grandson would bring to the dojo once he obtained his provisional license. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 took his shoes off once he arrived inside the door of the Midoriya apartment and smiled at Inko, who he had come to see, to something akin to a daughter due to how much time he has spent at this apartment. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 sat down and thanked her for inviting him over, and she just smiled at him before putting the food down in front of everyone. Soon they all started to eat dinner and talk about their days. Izuku talked about the random student that had interrupted Present Mike during the presentation, which 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 laughed at and thought they likely failed or barely made it in. Izuku shrugged as he did remember that the student was in his zone but didn't know how well he did since he didn't bother watching, as he had gotten a full minute to himself in the zone since everyone else didn't realize there was no go in the hero field. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 laughed a bit when Izuku explained how everyone else reacted to him running in by himself so quickly. Good thing that you listened to my advice. All the time. That good solid minute likely provided you a decent lead that kept you high in the ranks, since no one was fighting you for the robots that were close by you at the start. 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said, and Izuku nodded his head, since by his math, he would likely be in the high 30s if he removed all of those points he got in the first minute, if you don't count rescue points. Soon the conversations came to an end and 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 said his goodbyes and told Izuku to enjoy the remaining time off from doing too much physical stuff, but that he should come every other day at minimum to the dojo so he can keep his skills from getting rusty. Izuku nodded his head and still planned to go almost every day, since he wanted to work on his skills with the wire strings, aka razor floss, which was a very thin metal wire that Izuku could move around with his hands and fingers. Overall, it was a really deadly weapon if you weren't careful, but it was also a powerful tool that Izuku couldn't pass up. It wasn't sharp, but if enough pressure was applied, then it could cut into the skin and kill someone if you did it around someone's neck, as an example. That was how Izuku spent the remaining months before UA started, and he had gained a decent level of control over the weapon. As such, Izuku's skills and training included the following. Izuku Midoriya. Alias. Occupation. Underground hero in training. Skills. Martial arts. Katana Izanagi. Wire strings. Throwing knives. Shuriken. Eskrima sticks. Throwing needles. Poison. Smoke bombs. Miscellaneous. Weapons. Overall, Izuku had a wide range of tools that he could use as long as he had them on him, and even then he was well trained in a range of martial arts due to 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 wanting him to be decent at different styles. Izuku wasn't a complete master of most of them, but he did have a large grasp on the ones he was taught, and due to Izuku's mind, he ended up combining stuff into his own fighting style depending on the opponent he faced. He never approached something with the same tactic because everything was always different. It was one thing to have a bare-bone plan for each situation, but a plan needs to adapt as you go to fit any need variables you find. Izuku sat down after 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 told him to take a break, and Izuku looked at the clock and day. He had only half a week left before UA would start, and he went over all of his training in the months after the entrance exam and made sure to get better at the things he was lacking in. You have done all you can to prepare yourself for the first day. Just remember, you will face discrimination. You will face hardship even at UA due to our society. I can't stop it all, so I apologize to my grandson because I don't know how the teachers at UA will be, but I believe you can trust in Principal 𝗍𝗍, who has suffered a large amount of discrimination and cruelty at the hands of humans, so he should be willing to support you. Also, remember to go to 𝗍𝗍 after the first day is over to reveal the fact that you are tea leaves, which will grant you more protection due to how much impact you have had in the hero community already. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, and Izuku nodded his head. He knew he would likely face discrimination at UA even though they had zero-tolerance police, but Izuku's old schools had it as well. Izuku could only take it with a grain of salt and push forward because it was his time to become a hero and create a new path for those discriminated against. It was the day. It was the first day of UA and being in the hero course at the school as Izuku woke up and clicked his alarm off. He made his way out of bed and started to get dressed as he looked at himself in the mirror and smiled at himself. He knew he had come a long way from the former short version of himself that hadn't worked out a day in his life. Izuku chuckled at remembering his former short body and weak self and was proud of how far he had come from there. Izuku grabbed Izanagi and made his way to the dining room table in their home as his mother had made him breakfast before she would head off to work. "Are you ready for your first day?" she asked him, and he nodded his head and thanked her for the food. Izuku wondered what Katsuki Bakugo would think if he ever learned of where Izuku was at now in life, as he was a student in the hero course and had passed such a bias exam. Though, Izuku wouldn't know for a while since he had his mother keep silent on the news on what Izuku was doing away from the Bakugos, since Izuku didn't need doubt being placed in his mind by Katsuki if he still held the same beliefs that he held back then, since Izuku hadn't checked in with the Bakugos in a while and only has gained information from his mother. Izuku sighed thinking about Katsuki but couldn't put too much thought into it as he had more important things to focus on as he stood up from the table and finished what he needed to before leaving for school. Izuku said goodbye to his mother and headed to the train station. 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗃 had texted Izuku and wished him a good first day, which made Izuku smile on the train, but soon the station he needed to arrive and Izuku got off and made the short walk from the station to the school building. He did get some looks like normal since he was carrying his sword on his hip, but there were zero rules in UA's handbook that stopped Izuku from bringing it in, and he was going to do so since he had his certification. Izuku looked up as he arrived at the school and was just amazed by it each time he arrived at the school due to the size of UA. After a few seconds, he started to walk again and made his way into the building, and started his search for classroom 1A, which he was going to be a part of. Izuku honestly hoped there wouldn't be Quirkless trash inside the room, but he knew he wouldn't be lucky since a lot of people grew up being praised for their so-called strong quirks, even though Izuku could think of so many ways to counter them, or L. Izuku honestly hoped there wouldn't be Quirkless trash inside the room, but he knew he wouldn't be lucky since a lot of people grew up being praised for their so-called strong quirks, even though Izuku could think of so many ways to counter them or leave the individual medically quirkless, for example, cutting one finger off a hand if the person had a 5-point finger contact quirk. It was brutal, but so was life, and the law allowed heroes to do as such. It just wasn't greatly looked upon by the public, which is another reason Izuku is going to underground heroics. After about a few minutes of walking, he arrived at the door for class 1A. Izuku was marveled at the size of the door but steeled his nerves and grabbed the door and opened it. After he opened the door, he was met with a handful of people arguing and flaring their quirks at each other, while most were sitting at their desk looking so disinterested in being in the class, which shocked Izuku since this was UA. How can you be disinterested in attending UA? Izuku thought as he shook his head slightly. Izuku moved towards his desk, which was given to him by his seat number in his paperwork that he received once he was confirmed to be attending. It was actually the first seat in the far left side of the room near the front, so he was right by the windows as well, which Izuku found good since he could put his sword in front of him where no one could grab it without him seeing them. After he sat it down, some students asked him if that was a real sword, which he nodded his head at and confirmed, which earned him questions on why he had an actual sword with him. "I have my certification for it and I plan to use it as a part of my overall hero gear. Also, there are no rules against me bringing it since I have certification to carry and wield it in my normal day operations, which means I take it everywhere with me. It's foolish to rely on a sole thing to defend yourself or to attack with," Izuku said, and some scoffed and said their quirks could handle anything thrown at them, which earned a scoff inside of Izuku's mind. Soon, though, a punch got thrown between the few people that had been arguing in the back. In all honesty, the reason they were arguing was about which quirks of theirs was better, which Izuku wanted to scoff at since he already came up with 5 different ways to render their quirks useless in combat. The fight started to get physical as Izuku was about to call the UA's emergency hotline, which was listed in their handbooks, but as the phone was going off and answered, he told the person on the other side that a teacher had arrived, so they weren't needed anymore. "Apologize for calling this, but a teacher already arrived, so I will let them handle it," Izuku said quietly, and the person on the other side still asked for his name and class, which he provided as he looked at the pro hero who was Eraserhead in the doorway. Izuku ended the call after giving his information and just watched the pro hero who had looked at Izuku and nodded his head for Izuku to keep silent since no one heard Izuku do the phone call or what he had said since they were all focused on the fight. Eraserhead watched the fight for a few more minutes and watched 5 of the students in his class use their quirks against each other. Eraserhead at this point had enough as he got out of his sleeping bag and walked into the room with still only Izuku having noticed the man. Eraserhead turned his quirk on and stopped the fight as he spoke up. "Enough. You 5 can head to the principal's office as you are now expelled from UA for illegal quirk usage and fighting in this school," Eraserhead said as he just expelled 5 of the 20 students in his class. Izuku's eyes widened when he saw the teacher do this, as he thought the man would only tell them to stop and sit down, but instead he expelled them. The students that he had just expelled argued with him, but he glared at them and told them to leave or they would be taken by force to the office if they refused to go under their own power. Izuku sat up straighter after that, and soon Eraserhead told them all that they could call him Izawa-sensei and to take the gym uniforms and head outside to the training field. After grabbing his sword, Izuku grabbed the uniform and quickly made his way out to the training ground after changing. Though he was surprised to find Izawa-sensei already waiting on the field with how fast Izuku had changed in all honesty. After waiting for about 10 minutes, which Izuku could tell annoyed the teacher, the other students arrived out on the field. "You all took 10 minutes. That is a waste of time and is illogical," Izawa-sensei said, but some of the females rolled their eyes, which he noticed. "Oh, you roll your eyes at that statement of mine, you better have a good reason," he said, and the girls that rolled their eyes scoffed at him and said they were only first years and they could waste a bit of time, which Izuku saw clearly annoyed the teacher. Noted. He hates wasting time. Izuku thought as he saw him look at those 3 girls that had scoffed at him and told them to head to the principal's office as they were no longer a part of the class and were expelled, making the girls' eyes widen. "This is UA, where we have only 3 years to turn you into full-fledged heroes to survive in the field. You don't have time to waste," Izawa-sensei said, and the class then went from 15 students, since 5 had already been removed, down to 12 only being left, and it hadn't even been a full 30 minutes of class. Is he planning to expel all of us? Izuku thought in his mind as he looked at the teacher, who only glared at everyone. Then he told everyone what they were going to be doing and had a few people go before it was Izuku's turn. "Take the ball and do whatever you need to do to get the furthest distance you can get. Quirks and anything else is approved," Izawa-sensei said as Izuku realized the wording of his statement didn't require a quirk to be used in these tests. Izuku smirked as he grabbed the ball and threw it up a bit and hit it with his sword as it was in the casing, which made it act like a bat. Some of the students scoffed as Izuku didn't use a quirk, which Izuku turned to them and spoke. "Not everyone has a physical quirk. There is a range of quirks which even includes mental ones. I just need to make use of what I can to overcome challenges in front of me," Izuku said as he stepped back in the line and noticed his teacher had a small smirk on his face. Though that soon changed after a girl said that these tests were turning out to be fun since they could use their quirks. This sparked a frown on their teacher's face as the teacher looked at them and spoke. "Fun? Oh, if you want fun, then let's up the challenge. Whoever comes in the last place will be deemed with no potential and expelled," Izawa-sensei said, and Izuku paled a bit. He knew he was really physically fit and all, but he didn't know if he could place higher than everyone else since they had quirks to use for some of these tests which fit them really well. God, I really hope some of them don't do as well or didn't really train physically, Izuku thought, even though that was horrible to think, but he wanted to keep his place in UA. Then Izuku heard the others complaining about it not being fair, which Izuku felt annoyed at due to the treatment he had received in life, but it seems his teacher had words to say to that. Izawa shut that down quickly though as he talked about natural disasters and villain attacks. Think discrimination is fair? It's not, yet it happens to people on a daily basis. Being a hero means correctly as much unfairness in this world as we can. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 stated as he glared at some of the students. As such, they got to work and the rest of the tests started as they moved on from the ball throw. As it went on, Izuku just analyzed people's quirks to see where he needed to do better compared to others so he wouldn't fall into the last place. Izuku made sure to always push his limits the best he could to ensure he overcame as many people in each test, from sit-ups and the long-distance run. Izuku knew he was likely cutting this close since he couldn't outpace everyone in these tests without a quirk, but he was without a doubt not in the last place. Soon the tests came to an end and Izuku found his name on the scoreboard, which surprised him a bit since he had placed 8th out of the 12 students that had remained in the class. Izuku turned his attention to the teacher as he waited to see if he would carry through his threat and surprise, or I guess not, to Izuku as he saw the teacher tell the girl that came in last to head to the principal's office as she was expelled from the hero course. A good chunk of the 10 other people that were left laughed at the girl, which made her cry even harder as she had gotten expelled, and Izuku could tell right away that was a stupid move on their part as his teacher turned to them and started to call out names. Izuku was shocked as he called every single name outside of Izuku's, which made him freak out a bit, but he was in for a world of shock as he heard what Eraserhead said next. Those that laughed at the girl are hereby kicked out of the hero course and expelled from UA, as we don't need people that lack empathy in this hero course or even this school. The others I called out are also kicked out due to the fact that you all held back and didn't do as best as you could in the tests. I wanted you to do as best as you could and you didn't, so you are not needed here in this course. 𝗧𝗪𝗧sensei said, and everyone's eyes widened as they all looked at him in shock. The ones that got kicked out for not doing their best were all those that placed lower towards the scoreboard, and they asked him why should they have gone all out. Even Izuku knew the answer to that, which dumbfounded him as he had that expression on his face as he turned to them. Eraserhead told them all that this was UA, where they were expected to go beyond and plus ultra in everything they did. As such, if they couldn't give everything they had for a simple test, then they didn't need to stay, since they wouldn't likely give it all they had for anything else they did during their time at the school. A few didn't like the answer though and attempted to attack Eraserhead, which Izuku found stupid as hell, as the man just erased their quirks and defeated them easily since they were relying on their quirks so much. Izuku watched as the 3 that attempted to attack the teacher get tied up. Well, now you 3 will be arrested for assault as well. Anyone else has a problem with my decisions and wishes to add assault charges to the list of their problems? Eraserhead asked with a small glare at them all, but none of them said anything as they shook their heads. Izuku was just dumbfounded as he watched this entire show, which is the best he could call it in all honesty. Eraserhead then looked at Izuku and told him to go get changed and head to the classroom where he will come back for him, since Principal 𝗍𝗂 needed to talk to him about his school schedule, but the principal would need to deal with all of the mess first. Izuku nodded his head and quickly ran off to get changed as he was a bit scared to get expelled. Within minutes, Izuku was now sitting in the classroom just waiting, as he didn't want to piss his teacher off as he knew the man was on a spree of expelling people. About half an hour later, the teacher came into the room and told Izuku to grab his stuff and follow him, as he would take him to the principal's office for his meeting. Eraserhead showed him the door and was about to leave when Izuku spoke up. "Ah, sensei?" Izuku called out, and 𝗧𝗪𝗧 turned his head and asked what Izuku needed. "I think you might want to join this meeting, since I got some information you will likely want to know moving forward, since I will be your sole student. I'm sure Principal 𝗍𝗪 will tell the other staff after I tell him, but I think you might want to hear it first." Izuku said, and 𝗧𝗪𝗧 had to admit to himself that he was slightly interested in what the sole surviving student of his purge could say that was so important that 𝗍𝗪 would inform all of the staff. He nodded his head and entered the room together with his student. Unknown to him, he would end up with a huge problem child moving forward from that day on. Izuku was a bit nervous as he entered the room, but the lessons that 𝗣𝗲𝗵 had drilled into him made their appearance, and the nervousness went away quickly as Izuku used the breathing methods that he was taught and calmed himself down. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 noticed the change in his student, which caught his eye, and the man wondered what the hell the student was going to tell the principal. "Sir, I've brought Izuku Midoriya, but he said he had something to tell us both that I should be here for," 𝗧𝗪𝗧 said as they entered the room, and 𝗍𝗪 looked at them with his normal smile on his face. "Ah, that is fine. It will do well for you to hear about his schedule and all as we figure it out since he is the only student to survive your purge. Well, that is if you don't expel him since this is only the first day after all. 𝗍𝗂 said with his normal smile as he sipped the tea but noticed Izuku didn't freak out or anything about being expelled but calmly sat down, which caught his attention as it did with Aizawa. The boy has been trained by someone. Interesting. 𝗍𝗂 thought as he looked over the first-year student as he judged him with a threat assessment with the thought of Izuku being trained by someone outside of the school since it would be hard for a quirkless child to get anyone help outside of family, which was rare as well based on statistics for quirkless people. It's sad but it's the truth as well of the world they lived in, which meant 𝗍𝗂 was on guard due to Izuku Midoriya having such a high level of training at keeping himself calm and controlled in addition to his results in the exam. 𝗍𝗂 wondered if Izuku had been sent to the school on purpose with some sort of goal in mind. Did the commission do this? 𝗍𝗂 thought as he knew the commission never liked 𝗍𝗂 since he did things as he pleased with all the legal protections he could have as he used laws on the books to justify every single action he has ever taken due to his distrust of humans in positions of power. So what is this information you wish to tell us, Izuku Midoriya? 𝗍𝗂 asked as he started to take another sip of tea but choked when he heard Izuku's statement. Oh, it's not a huge matter outside of me winning our bet that we had going on, 𝗍𝗂. After all, you never discovered I was the analysis tea leaves, or you would have told me the moment you found it out since we did have a bet going on. Which again I win. Izuku said with a small smirk on his face. Eraserhead's eyes widened and he turned his head quickly to Izuku, which he did so fast you would think he would have whiplash from the speed he turned to face his sole student. Even 𝗍𝗂 was stunned at what he heard as he stopped choking on the tea he was drinking as he looked at the student in front of him. What? 𝗍𝗂 asked again to make sure he heard that right. Izuku chuckled a bit. Don't tell me you forgot our bet I proposed to you months before the entrance exam? I do believe you owe me a favor that I can call in at any time I wish, no? Izuku asked, and 𝗍𝗂 was now sure Izuku Midoriya was tea leaves since he never told anyone about the bet that was going on. Well, I was quite sure you were an older person. This is quite unexpected, 𝗍𝗂 said as he put the tea down and offered some to Izuku, who accepted. Eraserhead was still in shock that his sole remaining student who was quirkless was also the highly sought-after analysis who had made impacts in the hero field with their work that helped solve many cases. Izuku chuckled as he saw Eraserhead groan and put his head on his desk as he called Izuku a problem child. 𝗍𝗂 smirked a bit as well since Eraserhead would be dealing with Izuku the most, but now 𝗍𝗂 just realized he had tea leaves in his office who he had been trying to get to work for him. He couldn't offer Izuku a job due to his age and lack of teaching degree, but he could without a doubt take Izuku Midoriya on as a personal student. I know you want me to be a personal student of yours, and I accept, of course. I tested out of all my first-year classes in anticipation of you wanting that as well, since it frees up a lot of my time for personal lessons and more private training with Aizawa-sensei, since my teacher at the dojo couldn't teach me the aspects of an underground hero since he was a limelight one. Izuku said. And both teachers' eyes widened at Izuku's statement and they asked him what pro hero had taught him. Izuku smiled a bit before speaking. My dojo teacher who became family to me and my mother hero name is 𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗃. The former #1 pro hero of Japan who was around years before All Might, and had he retired about 5 years before All Might's even made a name for himself. The person who held the title of #1 for even longer than All Might had held it. Izuku said, and both were shocked Izuku was taught by that man since 𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗃 had held the position of #1 longer than All Might has held it but had retired due to increasing age, even though it was believed he could have gone on for another few decades since he is around 60 years old now but was still extremely healthy back then when he was still younger. Overall, 𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗃 is only about 10 years older than All Might is currently, and 𝗍𝗂 knew that 𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗃 still held his license as well in the event he was needed for something near him if no other heroes were around. All Might needed to hold his position for about another 10 years to break 𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗃's record of holding the position of #1, but 𝗍𝗂 knew All Might wouldn't last that long, so the record would stay in the hands of 𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗃. 𝗍𝗂 was quite surprised to learn 𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗃. Wait, that sword. 𝗍𝗂 thought as his eyes shifted to the sword Izuku had on his side, and Izuku knew that the principal had made the connection. I see you realized what sword this is, Izuku said as he took it out of the cover and wielded it. 𝗍𝗂 then spoke up. How did you convince him to hand that sword over? It was his prized possession. 𝗍𝗂 asked as he knew the stories of the sword of being unbreakable. He lost a bet with me, but in all honesty, I think he always intended to give it to me since I am his protégé. I think he just wanted an excuse to do it. The bet was that you wouldn't figure out my identity by the time I got into UA, but he gave me it earlier than planned since he wanted me to get used to the weight of the sword since it's special. Indeed, this sword is Izanagi, the so-called indestructible sword. Izuku said with a smile as his left hand ran down the length of the blade, being careful not to cut himself on it. Izuku then put the blade back in the holder, which was called a scabbard and was in the color of green, which Izuku thought ironic since his main color for his outfit was green. I see. This certainly explains how you appeared so trained and also passed the exam, since I am assuming you went years worth of training. 𝗍𝗂 asked, and Izuku nodded his head as he explained that he encountered 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 when he was 9 years old. It was actually because of you, Eraserhead. I saw a battle you were doing in an alleyway, which resulted in my page about you in my notebooks, which I sent to 𝗍𝗂 after I turned into tea leaves to do my analysis without using my real name. Anyway, I saw how you fought and decided to change my dreams of being a pro hero to being an underground pro hero. At that time I had done no physical training, but I had been working on my analysis since I was 4 due to being quirkless. Izuku said as he explained the events that lead up to finding 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 and undergoing training by him. Izuku explained, in general, his level of training with weapons and everything else. The two teachers were happy with the amount of training that Izuku had been receiving, which meant he would be able to focus more on other aspects like underground aspects, rescue training, and other things that make up the parts of being a hero. 𝗍𝗂, by the way, I would like to use my favor you owe me if possible. Since I will be your personal student and all Anizawa's only student, as I am the last remaining in the class. Izuku said, and they listened to him and asked what his request was. I would like my file to be secured in your office and my digital file locked to only you and Aizawa to access, Izuku asked, and they were confused on why he was asking that. Izuku noticed their confusion, so he explained. I know the other staff knows I am quirkless, but I don't want it spread out of the staff nor the public finding out that I am quirkless. I don't have classmates to worry about, so it's easier as I want to delay the public knowing until I became a pro hero if possible, but I know it will be hard. I want to build up a track record before people start to object to me being a pro hero, since we know people will. Izuku explained, and 𝗍𝗂 found it easy to complete and said he wouldn't consider that the favor, as he agreed it was a logical and smart decision of them to do for Izuku's safety until he grew more and had a track recorded to defend himself in regards to the public. I will have the staff keep quiet about you being quirkless. You can trust the staff here, Izuku, since I hired everyone that had faced some discrimination at one point in time. Everyone isn't perfect and some things may fall through the cracks, but if you ever face problems, then please come to us, or at least me and Aizawa, as we will help you. 𝗍𝗂 said, and Izuku smiled a bit and nodded his head as a few tears went down his face, which he wiped away. Thanks, 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 and Mom have been the only ones supporting me. Even some that I considered family and still do a bit had always told me I would never be a hero, but I'm here now, aren't I? Izuku said with a smile, and 𝗍𝗂 nodded his head as Aizawa just hid a small smile in his scarf. Izuku asked if 𝗍𝗂 planned to tell the staff of him being tea leaves, and 𝗍𝗂 nodded his head and said he would, since they could ask for Izuku's help directly instead of leaving an email trail, but will be told to keep it silent even from any future staff that arrives as well. Even future staff will not be informed of Izuku being quirkless unless Izuku approves of it, since his files will be locked away in 𝗍𝗂's office. 𝗍𝗂 did warn Izuku that his information would be out to more people once he went for a provisional license, since Hero Commission people would have access to it, but since he was going underground there was a special destination that limited the information more and didn't have much of it public, but the Commission still held it. Izuku nodded his head and hoped UA would support him if it ever got out, which 𝗍𝗂 said they would, especially with him being tea leaves, since he had made a large impact on heroes as they have grown a bit stronger due to his notes. Anyway, now that I am going to be your personal student, I believe that it will change my overall schedule even more? Izuku asked, and 𝗍𝗂 chuckled as he nodded his head. Indeed, I believe we will end up spending most of the day together outside of when Aizawa wants to train you. I will mark all of your blocks free periods and we will just move you around as we want you. If you are not doing something with one of us or another staff person, then you will be free to do homework or train on your own. Most of our time will be spent pushing your education at a fast pace to get your second year done this year, your third year completed during your second year, and hopefully have the entire third year for you to train and do work studies. 𝗵𝘃𝗧𝗍 said, and Izuku then spoke up as he said that they would still have heroic class at the same time, but other things may happen outside of that once they figure out what to do, since he will be teaching Izuku one-on-one now. Izuku did say that he would test where he stood currently in combat and underground tactics before moving on to other things, so he knew where to add on, as he knew 𝗣𝗲𝗵𝗃 was a decent teacher, so he was sure Izuku would be at an acceptable level already. Soon the conversations came to an end and 𝗵𝘃𝗧𝗍 told Izuku he was free, as he and Izuku had to start planning for Izuku's future schedule and training. He was told to just head to 1A the next day like normal for homeroom, since he would still have that each day. This was due to the fact that Eraserhead would need to deliver any announcements or any sudden changes, so having the homeroom class as standard would allow a perfect chance to ensure things were talked about before they happened. Izuku nodded his head and soon left out of the door, but could hear Izuku grumble about Izuku being a problem child of the year as Izuku went out the door. Izuku leaned back in and looked at his teacher. "I am your sole student, so I am the only one that could earn that anyway," Izuku said as he left again quickly as the man glared a bit. Izuku could only chuckle a bit, as the man now had a lot more on his plate than he was bargaining for when he started the year out. 𝗵𝘃𝗧𝗍 though soon broke into laughter after Izuku walked a few steps away from the door, and it sent a chill down his spine. "Oh, that is scary," Izuku thought as he quickens his pace to leave UA for the day so he didn't get called back in by 𝗵𝘃𝗧𝗍.